If you're using this to fall asleep, that's exactly why I make these videos. Maybe subscribe and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Let's begin. Here's the thing about lost civilizations. We love the idea. Ancient Atlantis, Lemuria, advanced cultures that vanished without a trace. It's romantic, mysterious, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit true. But not in the way you think. The question isn't really about Atlantis or ancient aliens. It's deeper than that, more unsettling. What if there was a civilization before us? Not before recorded history, before humans entirely, before our species even existed. Could we tell? Think about that for a second. Really think about it. Humans have been around for maybe 300,000 years. Modern civilization? About 6,000 years. We've had industry for 250 years. That's nothing. A blink. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Do the math. If another species built cities 100 million years ago, what would be left? What could survive that long? Rock erodes, metal corrodes, plastic breaks down. Even our biggest structures would crumble to dust. Mountains rise and fall, continents drift. The ocean floor gets recycled every 200 million years through subduction. Everything gets erased. In 2018, a scientist named Gavin Schmidt asked this exact question. He works for NASA, studies climate. And he realized something strange. We look for ancient civilizations by digging up their stuff. Pottery, tools, buildings. But that only works for recent history. Go back far enough and there's nothing to find. So he asked, what would we even look for? Not ruins, not artifacts. Those don't last. Instead, you'd look for chemical signatures, traces in the rock, evidence of industrial activity, things that leave a mark on the planet itself. We call it the Silurian Hypothesis, named after a Doctor Who episode. Because why not? The science is serious even if the name isn't. Here's what it means. When humans burn fossil fuels, we change the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide levels spike. The climate shifts. Certain isotopes appear in unusual ratios. These changes get locked into sediment, into ice cores, into the geological record. They'll be there for millions of years. Our industrial civilization leaves a signature. Could another civilization have left the same signature millions of years before us? And would we recognize it if they did? Schmidt wasn't saying it happened. He was asking if we'd know. And the answer is uncomfortable. We might not. We probably wouldn't. Unless we knew exactly what to look for. The fossil record has gaps, huge ones. Most species that ever lived left no trace. Fossilization is rare. It requires specific conditions, the right sediment, the right chemistry. Most creatures just rot away. Even dinosaurs, which ruled for 165 million years, are known from incomplete skeletons. We found maybe a few thousand individuals out of billions that must have lived. Now imagine a species that lived for just a few million years, or less, and didn't have bones, or lived in areas where fossilization was unlikely. You'd find nothing, not a single trace. So we return to the question, what would we look for? What marks does civilization leave that could survive deep time? That's where this gets interesting, and strange, and maybe a little bit frightening. So what are we actually looking for? What marks could survive 100 million years? Start with carbon. When you burn fossil fuels, you release carbon that's been locked underground for millions of years. This carbon has a specific isotopic signature. It's different from the carbon in living things, different from the carbon in the ocean. When it floods into the atmosphere, it leaves a spike in the geological record. We can see our own spike forming right now, in sediment cores, in ice cores, in the layers currently being laid down. Future geologists will look at this moment and see a sudden jump in, carbon-12. They'll see atmospheric CO2 levels shoot up. They'll know something happened, something big. Could there be older spikes, buried deeper in the rock? Here's the problem. The further back you go, the messier the signal gets. Rock layers get compressed, heated, folded, subducted into the mantle and melted. The ocean floor completely recycles every 200 million years. Continental rock lasts longer, but it gets weathered, eroded, metamorphosed. The details blur. You'd need perfect preservation, the right kind of sediment, minimal disturbance for tens of millions of years. It's possible, but rare. Gavin Schmidt ran the numbers. He looked at how much of Earth's surface we've actually examined in detail at various depths. For rocks 100 million years old, we've studied maybe a fraction of a percent. Most of the planet is ocean. Most continental rock is buried under soil, vegetation, cities. We've drilled deep cores in a few places, looked at exposed cliff faces, examined quarries, and mines. But it's not systematic. We're not looking for industrial signatures from the Cretaceous. Why would we? Dinosaurs didn't build factories, so the data is sparse, incomplete. If there was a spike, we might have missed it. We probably would have missed it, unless it was obvious. Here's what would be obvious. Plastics, synthetic materials that don't exist in nature. We've created compounds that never appeared on Earth before. Polymers, industrial chemicals. They'd stand out. They'd be weird, unmistakable. But plastics break down, not quickly by human standards. A plastic bottle takes 450 years to decompose, but 450 years is nothing in geological time. UV light degrades it. Bacteria eventually learn to eat it. Give it 1 million years and it's gone. Maybe some fragments survive in the right conditions, but you wouldn't find plastic bags from 100 million years ago. What about metals? We've mined enormous amounts of copper, iron, aluminum, concentrated them in cities, shaped them into structures. When civilization falls, all that metal is in one place, concentrated in ways nature doesn't do. Metal corrodes, iron rusts, copper oxidizes, but the concentration remains. You'd find unusual ore deposits, strange clusters of minerals, things that don't match natural geological processes, except we do find strange deposits, all the time. We explain them through geology, hydrothermal vents, volcanic activity, plate tectonics, and we're probably right. But how would we know if one of them was different? If one was the corroded remains of an ancient city? You'd need to look closely, very closely, at the ratios of different metals, the isotopic signatures, the spatial distribution. It's possible someone already found evidence and didn't recognize it, classified it as a natural formation and moved on. That's the unsettling part. We might not know what we're looking at. Then there's the question of scale. How big does a civilization need to be to leave a mark? We think big, global, industrial, like us. But what if they were smaller? A few million individuals, concentrated in one region. They might have had technology, culture, cities even, but their footprint would be tiny. Look at Easter Island. 1,000 people built those statues, created a complex society, then collapsed. If you didn't know to look there, you'd never find it. The island is tiny, remote. Most of the structures are stone, which lasts. But imagine they'd built with wood, or lived in a place that later sank beneath the ocean. You'd find nothing. Now imagine that same scenario playing out 50 million years ago, in a place that's now subducted under a tectonic plate. Gone, erased, no trace. The Earth is very good at erasing things, so we look for global signatures, things that would show up everywhere, in multiple locations, in different types of rock. That's harder to miss. Climate change is one. When you pump greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, the whole planet warms. Ice melts. Sea levels rise. Ocean chemistry changes. Species go extinct. All of this leaves traces. We see it in the fossil record. Mass extinctions. Rapid climate shifts. The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, 56 million years ago, saw temperatures spike by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius in just a few thousand years. Carbon isotope ratios went haywire. Deep ocean creatures died off. It looks like something dumped massive amounts of carbon into the atmosphere. We think it was volcanic activity, or methane release from the ocean floor, natural processes, and it probably was. But here's the thing, it looks almost identical to what we're doing now. Same carbon signature, same warming rate, same ocean acidification. If you didn't know about humans, you'd classify our current warming as a natural event. Volcanic, geological, whatever. So how do we tell the difference between natural climate events and industrial ones? You look for patterns. Natural events tend to be gradual, or tied to specific geological processes. Volcanic eruptions leave ash layers. Meteor impacts leave iridium. Each event has a signature beyond just carbon. An industrial civilization would show multiple signatures at once. Carbon spike, nitrogen compounds from fertilizer, plastics, metals, synthetic chemicals, radioactive isotopes if they had nuclear power. The combination would be distinctive, weird, hard to explain through natural processes alone. We haven't found that combination, not in any ancient rock layer, not yet. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, especially when we've barely looked. Schmidt's point wasn't that ancient civilizations existed, it was that we wouldn't necessarily know if they had. Our methods are designed to find recent history. Pottery from 10,000 years ago, stone tools from 1 million years ago. We're not set up to detect industrial signatures from 100 million years ago. We'd need to look differently, sample more widely, examine rocks we usually ignore. Test for chemicals we don't expect to find, and even then, we might miss it. Here's another problem. Civilization might not look like ours. We assume technology means industry, fossil fuels, metal, concrete, but that's just one path, one way to build a complex society. What if they used biological technology, engineered organisms instead of machines, grew their structures instead of building them, used chemistry we haven't discovered? Their signature would be completely different. We wouldn't recognize it. Or what if they were smart enough to avoid our mistakes, used renewable energy, didn't pump carbon into the atmosphere, left a lighter footprint? Their civilization might have lasted longer than ours will, but left less evidence. The more sustainable they were, the less we'd find. That's ironic. The most successful civilizations might be invisible to us. The ones that collapsed quickly, that burned through resources and died out, those would leave the clearest marks. We'd find their mistakes, their excess, not their achievements. So when we look for ancient civilizations, we're really looking for ancient failures, societies that did what we're doing, that took the same destructive path. Maybe we haven't found any because they were smarter than us, or maybe they just didn't exist. Both options are worth considering. Both tell us something important about what's possible, about what lasts, about what we should be looking for, and about what we might be leaving behind. It's strange when you think about it. We're separated by thousands of miles, different time zones, different lives, but we're all wondering the same things, about what came before, about what might be hidden in the rocks, about whether we're really the first. These questions connect us, across distance, across time, the same curiosity that made our ancestors look at the stars and wonder. Now, let's talk about what we're actually leaving behind. We're leaving behind a lot, more than any civilization in history, but here's the problem, most of it won't last. Think about what we make things from: plastic, steel, concrete, glass. These feel permanent. They're not on geological timescales. Plastic breaks down, not quickly. A water bottle takes 450 years, a plastic bag takes 20 years, but that's nothing. That's a blink. We're talking about millions of years, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. The plastic doesn't disappear, it breaks into smaller pieces, microplastics. Then those break down further. Eventually it's just molecules, carbon and hydrogen. The same stuff that was there before we turned it into a bottle. Steel rusts. We know this. Leave a car in a field. Come back in 50 years. It's a pile of rust-coloured metal and broken glass. Come back in 500 years. It's mostly gone. The metal has oxidized. Returned to iron oxide. Basically ore again. Concrete cracks. Water gets in. Freezes. Expands. The concrete breaks apart. Plants grow in the cracks. Their roots push deeper. More cracking. More breaking. A concrete building can collapse in 100 years without maintenance. In 1,000 years, it's rubble. In 10,000 years, it's scattered stones that might look natural. Glass lasts longer, but it's still fragile. It breaks. The pieces get smaller. Eventually they're sand again, which is what glass is made from anyway. Our cities are temporary. This is hard to accept. They feel so solid, so permanent, but they're not. Look at Pripyat, the city near Chernobyl, abandoned in 1986. That's less than 40 years ago. The buildings are already falling apart. Trees grow through the floors, walls collapse, paint peels, metal rusts. Nature is taking it back, and that's with the building still standing, with the concrete still mostly intact. Give it another 100 years. Most of those buildings will be rubble. Give it 1,000 years. You'd have to know where to look to find anything. Now think about 65 million years, the time since the dinosaurs. Almost nothing survives that long on the surface. Wood rots, paper dissolves, fabric disintegrates, leather breaks down, rubber crumbles, all the organic stuff we make, gone in centuries, maybe decades in the right conditions, even stone weathers. Look at ancient statues, the faces are worn smooth, the inscriptions are barely readable. That's after a few thousand years. After a few million years, most stone structures would be unrecognizable. The pyramids feel eternal. They're not, they're already eroding. The smooth limestone casing that once covered them is mostly gone. stolen for other buildings. What's left is rough and weathered. Give them another 1,000,000 years. They'd be hills. Strange hills, maybe. But without excavation, you might not know they were built. So what does last? What actually survives deep time? Fossils. But fossilization is rare, incredibly rare. You need specific conditions. The organism has to die in the right place, usually underwater, usually in sediment. The sediment has to bury it quickly, before it rots or gets eaten. Then the sediment has to turn to rock, the right kind of rock. Then that rock has to survive, not get melted, not get eroded away, not get subducted into the Earth's mantle. Most things that die don't fossilize. Most things that fossilize don't survive. Most fossils that survive don't get found. We've found maybe 0.01% of all species that ever lived, maybe less. The fossil record is incredibly incomplete. It's like trying to understand a book when 99.99% of the pages are missing. And here's the thing, fossilization works best for certain things. Bones, shells, teeth, hard parts, things that can turn to stone. It doesn't work well for soft tissue, skin, organs, muscle. These rot too fast. We have a few rare fossils with soft tissue preserved. They're treasured, they're exceptions, and it really doesn't work for technology. Metal oxidizes, plastic breaks down, glass dissolves. Even if these things got buried in sediment, they wouldn't fossilize, they'd just disappear. There's another problem, plate tectonics. The Earth's surface is constantly recycling. The ocean floor is the youngest part. Most of it is less than 200 million years old. The oldest parts are maybe 280 million years old. That's it. The ocean floor gets created at mid-ocean ridges, spreads outward, eventually gets pushed under continents, subducted, melted, recycled. The cycle takes about 200 million years. This means anything on the ocean floor gets destroyed. Completely. Melted back into the mantle. No trace left. The continents are older. Some rocks are billions of years old. But even continents get recycled. Slowly. Mountains rise, erode. The sediment washes into the ocean, gets subducted, melted, rises again as new rock. The cycle is slower, but it still happens. There are very few places on Earth where rocks from 65 million years ago are still at the surface. Most have been buried, eroded, transformed, destroyed. So if there was a civilization 100 million years ago, where would we find it? The ocean floor from that time is gone. Most of the continental surface from that time is buried or eroded. We'd be looking for traces in rocks that might not exist anymore. But let's say some rocks survived. What would we find? Maybe a thin layer, a geological anomaly, strange concentrations of certain elements. Plastics break down into carbon, but the carbon has a specific isotope ratio, different from natural carbon. We might see that, a spike in certain carbon isotopes, lasting maybe a few centimeters in the rock record. Metals would leave traces too, aluminum, titanium, rare earth elements. These don't occur naturally in high concentrations at the surface. If we found a layer with unusual amounts, that might be a sign, but it would be subtle, easy to miss, easy to explain other ways. Radioactive isotopes could be a marker, nuclear power, nuclear weapons. These create isotopes that don't exist naturally, or exist in different ratios. We might find a spike, a thin layer with unusual radiation signatures, but after millions of years, most isotopes would have decayed. The signal would be weak. The Silurian Hypothesis explores this. It's a thought experiment, named after a Doctor Who episode. The Silurians were a reptile civilization that lived on Earth before humans. The hypothesis asks, how would we know? Adam Frank and Gavin Schmidt wrote about this in 2018. They're scientists. Frank is an astrophysicist. Schmidt is a climate scientist. They weren't arguing that ancient civilizations existed. They were asking, what would be left? Their answer, not much. Maybe nothing we'd recognize. Industrial civilizations change the planet. We're doing it now. Carbon emissions, plastic pollution, nuclear isotopes, mass extinction, changes in sediment composition. These leave markers, thin layers in the rock. But these layers are subtle. You have to know what to look for, and they might not survive. Plate tectonics could destroy them, erosion could remove them, metamorphism could transform them beyond recognition. The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum happened 56 million years ago. The Earth warmed rapidly, carbon isotopes shifted, species went extinct, new species appeared. We can see this in the rocks. a thin layer marking a climate crisis. Some people wondered, could this have been caused by an industrial civilization? Probably not. The isotope signatures are wrong, the scale is wrong, the timing is wrong, but it shows that climate events do leave traces, thin traces, in specific rocks that you have to know how to read. Here's another problem. We're biased. We know what to look for because we know what we're making. We look for plastics, metals, concrete, radiation, the signatures of our civilization. But what if an ancient civilization was different? What if they didn't use metal? What if they didn't split atoms? What if their technology was biological? Or based on something we haven't thought of? We wouldn't know what to look for. We might see the traces and not recognize them. Or we might not see traces at all because we're looking in the wrong places for the wrong things. This is the problem with absence of evidence. We haven't found any signs of ancient civilizations, but would we recognize the signs if we saw them? Are we looking in the right rocks? Do those rocks even still exist? The Earth is very good at erasing. It's been doing it for 4.5 billion years. Continents rise and fall, oceans open and close, mountains erode to plains, plains get pushed up into mountains, everything gets recycled, everything gets buried, everything gets forgotten. We're finding dinosaur fossils because we know what to look for. We know what dinosaur bones look like. We know what rocks they're in. We know where to dig. And even then, we've found maybe 1,000 dinosaur species. But there were probably tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. We're missing most of them. If we're missing most dinosaurs and we're looking for them, what are we missing that we're not looking for? The geological record is incomplete. It's biased towards certain times, certain places, certain conditions. Rocks from some periods are common, rocks from other periods are rare. Some time periods are almost completely missing from the record, not because nothing happened, but because the rocks didn't survive. There are gaps, long gaps, millions of years where we have almost no rocks, almost no fossils, almost no information. Anything could have happened in those gaps. We wouldn't know. This doesn't mean ancient civilizations existed. It means we can't rule them out based on absence of evidence. The evidence might be gone, or we might not know how to read it, or we might not be looking in the right places. The Earth keeps secrets, not deliberately, just by being the Earth, by doing what it does, recycling, eroding, burying, transforming. The planet doesn't care about preserving history. It cares about equilibrium, about cycles, about returning everything to the state it came from. We think of the ground as solid, permanent. It's not. It's fluid. On long timescales, rock flows like water, continents drift, ocean floors spread, mountains rise and fall. The surface we stand on is temporary. It's just moving very slowly. And that's the challenge. We're looking for traces of something that might not have left traces, in rocks that might not exist anymore, using methods that might not detect what we're looking for. It's like trying to find a specific grain of sand on a beach, after the beach has been washed away and rebuilt and washed away again 1,000 times. So people look for evidence, specific things that might prove an ancient civilization existed. They point to structures, objects, anomalies, things that seem out of place, things that seem too advanced, things that don't fit the accepted timeline. Let's look at what they're actually claiming. The most common evidence is megalithic structures, giant stone buildings, pyramids, temples, walls made of massive blocks fitted together perfectly. The argument goes like this. Ancient people were primitive. They had basic tools, bronze chisels, copper saws, stone hammers. How could they move 80-ton blocks? How could they cut granite so precisely? How could they align buildings to celestial bodies with such accuracy? It must have been someone else. Someone more advanced. An earlier civilization with better technology, or aliens, or Atlanteans. Someone who knew things we didn't figure out until recently. Let's start with the pyramids. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built around 2560 BCE. That's about 4,600 years ago. It's made of 2.3 million stone blocks. Each block weighs about 2.5 tons on average. Some weigh 80 tons. The blocks fit together tightly. You can't slide a piece of paper between them in some places. The base is level to within 2 centimeters across 230 meters. The sides align almost perfectly to true north. People say, how did they do this without modern tools, without lasers, without computers? Here's how. Time, labor, skill. Lots of all three. We have records. Not complete records, but enough. The ancient Egyptians wrote things down. They left papyri describing construction projects. They painted tomb walls showing workers hauling stones. They left the tools behind. We found copper chisels, wooden sledges, rope. The actual stuff they used, they didn't have steel, but they had copper. Copper is soft. It dulls quickly on hard stone like granite, but it works on limestone. Most of the pyramid is limestone, softer stone. You can cut it with copper tools. It just takes time. For the harder granite, they used harder stones. Dolerite pounders, basically round rocks. You pound the granite. Over and over, it breaks down. Slowly, very slowly, but it works. Moving the blocks, sledges, ropes. Lots of people pulling. They wet the sand in front of the sledge. This reduces friction. A wall painting from the tomb of Jehuti-Hotep shows exactly this. Workers pulling a statue on a sledge. A guy at the front pouring water on the sand. Scientists tested this. Wet sand reduces friction by 50%. It works. It's not magic. It's physics. The precision? Practice. The Egyptians built pyramids for centuries. The first ones were rough. The Step Pyramid at Saqqara, built around 2670 BCE. It's basically a stack of mastabas, rectangular tombs, one on top of another, not smooth, not precise. Then they got better. The Bent Pyramid at Dashur, they started building at one angle, changed their minds halfway up, used a different angle. It looks weird, like they made a mistake, because they did. They were learning. The Red Pyramid, also at Dashur, built right after the Bent Pyramid. This one worked. Smooth sides, consistent angle. They figured it out. Then came the Great Pyramid, the peak of their skill. After decades of practice, after learning from mistakes, after refining techniques across multiple projects, this is how humans work. We start rough, we practice, we get better. We don't need lost civilizations to explain this. We need time and effort. The alignment to true north? They used the stars. Specifically, they used the circular path of stars around the celestial pole. You watch stars at night. Mark where they rise, mark where they set. The midpoint between those marks is true north. It takes patience, but it works, and it's accurate. People also point to Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, built around 9600 BCE. That's 11,600 years ago, way before the pyramids, before agriculture, before cities, before civilization as we usually define it. It's a temple complex, massive stone pillars, T-shaped, up to 6 meters tall, weighing up to 20 tons, arranged in circles, decorated with carvings, animals, symbols, abstract shapes. The argument, hunter-gatherers couldn't build this. They were nomadic. They didn't have the organization, the labor force, the technology. Someone else must have built it, an earlier advanced civilization. But here's what we actually know. Hunter-gatherers built it. We know because we've excavated the site. We've found their tools, their trash, their bones. We've dated everything, multiple times, using multiple methods. It's all consistent. The people who built Göbekli Tepe were hunter-gatherers, but they weren't simple. They were skilled. They knew their environment. They knew stone. They'd been making stone tools for thousands of years. They knew how to quarry, how to carve, how to move heavy objects, and they had motivation, religion, community, ritual. These matter to humans, always have. People will do incredible things for beliefs, for belonging, for meaning. They probably gathered seasonally, different groups, coming together for ceremonies, for feasts, for construction. This explains the scale. You don't need a permanent city. You need periodic cooperation, and humans are good at that. The technology isn't mysterious. Stone tools, antler picks, wooden levers, fire to crack rock, water to exploit cracks. Techniques people had used for millennia, just applied on a larger scale, with more organization, more purpose. Puma Punku gets mentioned a lot, in Bolivia, part of the Tiwanaku site. Built around 500 to 600 CE, that's only 1500 years ago, not ancient by geological standards. The stones are precisely cut. Right angles, smooth surfaces, intricate interlocking shapes. Some blocks weigh over 100 tons. People say, look at these cuts. Look at this precision. You'd need diamond-tipped power tools. You'd need modern machinery. Ancient people couldn't do this, but they did. We know they did, because the site is full of evidence, unfinished blocks, broken tools, quarries nearby showing exactly where the stone came from, experimental archaeology showing how the techniques work. the Tiwanaku, people used hard stone tools, hammer stones, they used sand as an abrasive, they used water, they used time, lots of time. A single block might take months to shape, but they had months, they had years, they had generations. The precision comes from patience, from checking, from grinding slowly, from using the stone itself as a guide. You make one surface flat, then you use that surface to make another surface flat, then another. The precision builds on itself, moving 100-ton blocks, ramps, rollers, levers, teams of people, the same techniques used everywhere, the same techniques that work, the same techniques we've tested and proven. The Easter Island statues, the Moai. People ask, how did they move 80-ton statues across the island? Without wheels? Without metal? They walked them, literally. They rocked them back and forth, side to side, like walking a refrigerator. Teams of people with ropes, pulling in rhythm. The statue walks forward, slowly, very slowly, but it works. Researchers tested this. They made a replica Moai. They used the technique. It worked. 18 people moved a 10-ton statue, the math scales. More people, bigger statue, same principle. Baalbek in Lebanon, the Temple of Jupiter. The foundation has stones weighing 800 tons, the largest worked stones ever moved in the ancient world. How? We don't know exactly. The Romans didn't write down the technique, but we know they moved them, because the stones are there, in place, fitted together. We can guess. Massive teams, hundreds of people, rollers, levers, ramps, lots of time. The Romans were excellent engineers. They built aqueducts, roads, bridges, massive structures all over their empire. They knew how to move stone. Not knowing the exact technique doesn't mean it was impossible. It means we've lost the knowledge. Which happens. Techniques get forgotten when they're not needed anymore. When the people who knew them die. When the empire falls and nobody builds temples anymore. Here's the pattern. Someone points to an ancient structure, says it's too advanced, too precise, too massive. Couldn't have been built with ancient technology. Then archaeologists investigate. Find the tools, find the quarries, find the evidence of exactly how it was built. Test the techniques, prove they work. But the claims don't stop. They just move to a different structure, a different site, a different mystery. The problem isn't evidence, it's acceptance. People want ancient mysteries. They want lost civilizations. They want something more than, humans worked really hard for a really long time. But that's the actual answer most of the time. Humans worked hard. For a long time. With simple tools. With patience. With skill passed down through generations. With motivation from religion or politics or pride or all three. We're good at building. We've always been good at building. We don't need help from lost civilizations. We just need time and purpose. The Antikythera. Mechanism gets mentioned. It's a real anomaly, a Greek device, found in a shipwreck, dated to around 100 BCE. It's a mechanical computer, bronze gears, calculating astronomical positions, predicting eclipses, tracking the Olympic Games. It's incredibly sophisticated. Nothing else like it appears in the archaeological record for over 1,000 years. People say, this proves ancient technology was more advanced than we thought. Maybe there was earlier knowledge, earlier devices, lost to time, maybe, but probably not. The Antikythera mechanism shows that one person or one group figured something out, made something remarkable. Then the knowledge was lost, not because of a civilization collapse, just because knowledge is fragile. Books burn, teachers die, students lose interest, wars disrupt learning, economic changes make certain skills unnecessary, technology gets forgotten. It happens all the time. The Romans had concrete that could set underwater. That lasted thousands of years. Better than modern concrete in some ways. We lost the recipe. For over 1,000 years, nobody knew how to make it. We've only recently figured it out again by analysing ancient samples. Does this mean there was a lost Roman super-civilization? No. It means knowledge is fragile and specific. Damascus steel, medieval swords, incredibly strong, distinctive patterns in the metal. The technique was lost. We've only recently figured out how it might have worked. Does this mean medieval smiths had lost ancient knowledge? Maybe. Or maybe they just developed a technique, used it. Then it faded when trade routes changed and the specific materials weren't available anymore. Ancient batteries, the Baghdad battery, clay jars, iron rods, copper cylinders, from around 200 BCE to 200 CE. They could theoretically produce a small electrical charge if filled with acidic liquid. People say ancient electricity, lost technology, proof of advanced knowledge, or they're just jars. The electrical effect is accidental. Or they were used for something else entirely, like storing scrolls. We don't know. Calling them batteries is speculation, interesting speculation, but not proof of anything. The point is this: anomalies exist, objects that seem out of place, knowledge that seems too advanced. But anomalies don't prove lost civilizations. They prove humans are creative, occasionally brilliant, sometimes lucky, and often we lose what we've learned. Every culture has stories of golden ages, times when things were better, when people knew more, when giants walked the earth, when gods taught humans secrets. These stories matter. They tell us something about human psychology, about how we think about the past, about our relationship with knowledge and loss. But they're stories, not evidence, not proof, not history in the way we mean when we talk about evidence and facts and dates. The evidence people point to for ancient civilizations falls into patterns, impressive structures, lost techniques, anomalous objects, unexplained precision, and the explanations fall into patterns too: time, effort, skill, practice, knowledge that was gained and lost, techniques that worked and were forgotten. Nothing requires a lost advanced civilization. Everything fits within what we know humans can do, have done, will do again. The real mystery isn't how ancient people built things, it's why we're so reluctant to give them credit. Why we'd rather imagine lost civilizations or alien intervention than accept that our ancestors were smart, patient, skilled, capable of remarkable things with simple tools and lots of time. Maybe that says more about us than about them. But what if we're looking in the wrong place? What if the evidence isn't on land at all? What if it's underwater? Sea levels have changed dramatically. During the last ice age, they were 120 meters lower than today. That's 400 feet. The coastlines were completely different. Where there's ocean now, there was land, dry land, habitable land, land where people could have lived, built cities, developed cultures. Then the ice melted, the seas rose, and everything got swallowed. This actually happened. It's not speculation, it's geology. Around 12,000 years ago, the ice sheet started melting. Sea levels rose. Fast. In geological terms, some areas flooded quickly. The Black Sea. It used to be a freshwater lake, smaller, lower. Then around 5600 BCE, the Mediterranean broke through. Water poured in. The sea level rose, hundreds of feet. In maybe a year, maybe less. People living on those shores would have seen it coming. The water rising, day by day, week by week, their homes flooding, their fields disappearing, their world drowning. Robert Ballard found evidence of this. The guy who found the Titanic. He explored the Black Sea floor, found ancient coastlines, underwater, found structures, possible buildings, dating to before the flood. This proves people lived there, before the water came. It doesn't prove advanced civilization, just proves people lived on land that's now underwater. The same thing happened everywhere. Coastlines around the world, flooded, drowned, lost, Doggerland, between Britain and Europe. It was land during the Ice Age. Hills, rivers, forests. People lived there. We found their tools, in fishing nets, dredged up from the North Sea floor. Doggerland was big, the size of Britain. It connected Britain to mainland Europe. You could walk from London to Amsterdam, on dry land, through forests and meadows. Then the ice melted, the seas rose, Doggerland flooded. Gradually at first, then faster. By 6500 BCE, it was gone, completely underwater. Thousands of people would have lived there, over thousands of years. Their homes are gone, their tools scattered, their settlements buried under sediment and water. Does this mean Doggerland had advanced civilization? No. It means people lived there. Hunter-gatherers, early farmers maybe, normal people doing normal things. But it shows how much we've lost, how much is underwater, how incomplete our picture is. Sunderland, Southeast Asia. During the Ice Age, the sea level was lower. Indonesia wasn't islands, it was a peninsula, connected to mainland Asia, bigger than India. People lived there for tens of thousands of years. The area was tropical, rich, lots of resources, good place to live. Then the seas rose, the land flooded. What's now the Java Sea, the South China Sea, all of it used to be land, with rivers, forests, animals, people. We'll never find what was there. The sediment is too thick, the water too deep, the area too vast. Whatever existed is gone. This is the argument for underwater civilizations. Not that Atlantis existed, but that we've lost huge amounts of evidence, that the places we can study are only part of the story, that the coastlines where people naturally lived are now underwater. It's a fair point. We have lost evidence, lots of it. Underwater, buried, gone. But does that mean advanced civilizations existed? That's a different question. Here's what we know. People lived on coasts, always have. Coasts have resources: fish, shellfish, seabirds, seals, easy water transport, good places to settle. During the Ice Age, the coasts were different. Further out, where there's deep water now. People lived there, built settlements, left trash heaps, made tools. Then the water came. Everything flooded. The settlements drowned. The evidence scattered. Fish ate the organic material. Currents moved things around. Sediment buried what was left. This makes archaeology hard. Really hard. Underwater archaeology is expensive, difficult, dangerous. You need boats, divers, special equipment. You can't just dig. You have to survey, map, excavate carefully in terrible conditions. And most of the old coastline is deep, too deep for normal diving. You need submersibles, ROVs, serious technology, serious money. So we haven't looked much. We've barely scratched the surface. There could be settlements down there. Probably are. But finding them is hard. Does this mean we're missing advanced civilizations? Or just normal settlements? Probably normal settlements. Here's why. Advanced civilizations leave lots of evidence, not just in one place. Everywhere. They trade, they spread, they influence neighbors, they leave traces across wide areas. The Romans left evidence everywhere. Roads, aqueducts, buildings, coins, pottery, writing. You can't dig anywhere in the old Roman Empire without finding something. The Egyptians left pyramids, temples, tombs, statues, hieroglyphs, papyri, mummies, tons of stuff spread across centuries, impossible to miss. The Maya left cities, stelae, carvings, calendars, across multiple countries, in jungles, on mountains, near coasts, everywhere they lived. Advanced civilizations are messy. They spread out, they leave trash. Lots of trash, broken pottery, worn-out tools, collapsed buildings, graves, garbage dumps. If an advanced civilization existed 12,000 years ago, we'd find evidence, not just on drowned coastlines, inland too, in caves, in highlands, in places that didn't flood. We'd find their trash, their tools, their buildings, their dead. Something, somewhere. But we don't. We find normal human stuff. Stone tools, simple settlements, hunter-gatherer camps, early farming villages. Nothing advanced, nothing that suggests cities or writing or metallurgy or mathematics. The underwater argument assumes all the evidence is underwater, but that's not how civilizations work. They don't stay in one place. They expand. They trade. They interact with neighbors. Even if the main cities were coastal and now underwater, there'd be evidence inland. Trade goods, influenced neighbors, copied technologies. Something. There isn't. What we do find underwater is interesting, but not surprising. Dwarka, off the coast of India. Underwater structures, stone blocks, walls maybe. Dating is controversial. Some say 9,000 years old. Some say much younger. The site is real. There's something there, but what? Probably a port city. From a few thousand years ago. Maybe older. It's hard to tell underwater. Erosion is different. Dating is harder. Everything's covered in marine growth. The structures aren't clearly advanced. They're stone blocks, arranged in patterns. Could be buildings. Could be natural formations. Could be later construction that sank. Without better evidence, we can't say much. It's interesting, worth studying. But not proof of anything except that people built near water and sometimes things sink. Yonaguni, off Japan, underwater rock formations. They look geometric. Sharp angles, flat surfaces, terraces, steps. People say, these are carved, these are structures, these prove underwater civilization. Geologists say, these are natural. Sandstone erodes in straight lines, creates sharp edges, looks artificial but isn't. The debate continues. Some features look really artificial, others clearly natural. Maybe it's both. Maybe people modified natural formations, used them, carved them a bit. Or maybe it's all natural. Sandstone does weird things. Water erosion creates patterns, looks designed, but isn't. Without clear evidence of tool marks or construction techniques or associated artifacts, we can't say. It's ambiguous, which means it's not proof of anything. Bimini Road, off the Bahamas, underwater line of stones, looks like a road, or a wall, stretches for half a mile. People got excited. In the 1960s, Edgar Cayce had predicted Atlantis would be found near Bimini. This seemed to fit, but geologists studied it. It's beach rock, natural formation, limestone that forms in beach environments, cracks in regular patterns, looks artificial, isn't. The stones are the right shape, the right size, arranged in a line, but that's what beach rock does. It forms in layers. Parallel to the shore, breaks into blocks, looks like construction. Nature is good at creating patterns, straight lines, right angles, geometric shapes, hexagonal basalt columns, crystalline formations, sedimentary layers. Just because something looks designed doesn't mean it is. The underwater evidence is frustrating, because there should be stuff down there, normal stuff, settlements, tools, trash, evidence of the people who lived on old coastlines, and we can't get to most of it, can't study it, can't excavate it properly. This creates a gap, a space where imagination can run, where speculation can grow, where people can project their hopes for lost civilizations. But gaps in evidence aren't evidence. Not knowing isn't the same as knowing something different. We don't know everything about the past, we never will. Too much is lost, too much underwater, too much destroyed, too much buried. But what we do know is consistent. Humans developed slowly, gradually, over hundreds of thousands of years, from simple stone tools to complex civilizations. The coastlines flooded, evidence was lost, but not all evidence, not enough to hide an entire advanced civilization. If it existed, we'd find traces, somewhere, somehow. The ocean hides things, but it doesn't hide everything. The search continues. New technology helps. Sonar mapping, satellite imagery, underwater drones. We're getting better at finding things underwater. Maybe we'll find more settlements, more evidence of coastal life, more proof that people lived where there's water now. We probably will. It's just a matter of time and funding and technology. But will we find proof of advanced ancient civilizations? Probably not, because they probably weren't there. The evidence points elsewhere, to something stranger than lost Atlantis, something harder to explain with simple answers. Speaking of Atlantis, let's talk about where that story actually came from. Because Atlantis is real. Sort of. The story is real. The place probably isn't. Plato wrote about it around 360 BCE in two of his dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias. He's the only ancient source. Nobody else mentions Atlantis, just Plato. And here's the thing, Plato was writing philosophy, not history. He used stories to make points, to illustrate ideas, to teach lessons. The Atlantis story is about hubris, about a great civilization that got too proud, too powerful, too corrupt. The gods punished them, destroyed their island, sank it into the sea. It's a moral tale, a warning. Don't get too arrogant. Don't forget the gods. Don't think you're invincible. Plato says Atlantis existed 9,000 years before his time. That puts it around 9400 BCE, right after the Ice Age ended. He says it was beyond the Pillars of Hercules. That's the Strait of Gibraltar, out in the Atlantic Ocean. He describes the island, circular, with rings of water and land, a central city, advanced engineering, sophisticated culture, powerful navy. They controlled parts of Europe and Africa. They tried to conquer Athens, but Athens defeated them. Then earthquakes came, floods. In a single day and night, Atlantis sank. Gone. Everyone drowned. It's a great story, vivid, detailed, memorable. But is it true? Probably not. Here's why. Plato was making a point about Athens, about how ancient Athens was noble, virtuous, strong enough to defeat a superpower. He was praising Athenian values, using Atlantis as a contrast. He says he heard the story from Solon. Solon heard it from Egyptian priests. The priest had ancient records. They told Solon about Atlantis. But there's no Egyptian record of Atlantis, none. We found tons of Egyptian texts, papyri, temple inscriptions, administrative records, medical texts, religious texts, stories, myths. Nothing mentions Atlantis. Nothing mentions a great island civilization that sank. Nothing about a war with Athens 9,000 years earlier. If the Egyptians knew about it, they didn't write it down, which is weird, because Egyptians wrote everything down. Plus, Athens didn't exist 9,000 years before Plato, not as a city, not as a civilization. There were people there, hunter-gatherers, early farmers maybe, but no Athens, no navy, no war with Atlantis. Plato knew this. He was educated. He knew Greek history. He knew Athens was much younger. So why tell the story? Because it served his purpose. It illustrated his philosophy. It made his point about virtue and corruption, and the rise and fall of civilizations. He probably made it up, or heavily adapted some other story, changed details, added stuff, made it fit his argument. That's what philosophers do. They use stories as tools, as illustrations, not as historical records, but people took it literally. Even in ancient times, some believed Atlantis was real. They looked for it, speculated about where it might be. Crantor, a philosopher who lived shortly after Plato, he said he saw the Egyptian records. He confirmed the story, but we don't have his writings, just references to them. And no Egyptian records have ever been found. Aristotle, Plato's student, he didn't believe it. He said Plato invented Atlantis to make a philosophical point, then destroyed it when the story was done. That's probably right. Aristotle knew Plato, studied with him for years. He'd know if Plato was serious or not. But the story survived. It spread. It captured imaginations. People wanted to believe, wanted to find it. Over the centuries, people placed Atlantis everywhere. In the Atlantic, in the Mediterranean, in Antarctica, in South America, in Indonesia, in Ireland, in Scandinavia. Everywhere and nowhere. Every time someone finds underwater ruins, someone says it's Atlantis. Every time there's a natural formation that looks artificial, someone claims they've found it. But they haven't. Because it's not there. Because it never was. Here's what probably inspired the story. Real events, real disasters, real civilizations that collapsed. The Minoan civilization. On Crete and nearby islands, they were advanced. For the Bronze Age, they had cities, palaces, art, writing, trade networks, a powerful navy. Around 1600 BCE, disaster struck. The volcano on Thera erupted. That's Santorini now, one of the biggest eruptions in human history. The explosion was massive. Ash fell across the Mediterranean. Tsunamis hit coastlines. The sky darkened. Crops failed. Thera was destroyed completely. The island collapsed. The center sank into the sea, creating the caldera that's there now. The Minoans survived the eruption, but they never recovered. Their civilization declined. Within a few generations, they were conquered, absorbed, gone. This might be what inspired Atlantis. A real civilization, a real island, a real disaster, a real sinking. The details fit. An island civilization, advanced for its time, destroyed by natural disaster, partly sunk into the sea. Plato could have heard about this through Egyptian sources. The Egyptians traded with the Minoans. They knew about them. They might have recorded the eruption. Then Plato adapted the story, changed the location, changed the timeline, made it bigger, more dramatic, added moral lessons. That's the most likely explanation. Atlantis is based on Minoan Crete. Exaggerated, fictionalized, moved to the Atlantic to make it more mysterious. But people don't want that explanation. They want Atlantis to be real, to be ancient, to be advanced beyond anything we know. They want proof that advanced civilizations existed before ours, that we're not the first, that there's more to discover. It's a compelling idea. It speaks to something deep. The feeling that we've lost something, that we're missing something, that there's hidden knowledge waiting to be found, but wanting something doesn't make it real. The Atlantic Ocean is deep, really deep. We've mapped it, with sonar, with satellites, with submersibles. We know what's down there. No lost continent, no sunken island, no ruins of Atlantis. There are underwater features, seamounts, ridges, plateaus. But they're natural, volcanic, tectonic, not artificial. The mid-Atlantic ridge runs down the centre of the ocean. It's a spreading zone, where tectonic plates pull apart, new ocean floor forms, volcanoes erupt, islands sometimes appear, but it's never been above water, not in human history, not in the last million years. It's always been deep ocean. There's nowhere for Atlantis to be. No sunken landmass, no hidden continent, just deep ocean and natural geology. People point to the Azores, islands in the Atlantic. Maybe these are the peaks of Atlantis, the parts that didn't sink. But the Azores are volcanic, young, they formed recently. In geological terms, the oldest islands are only 8 million years old. Most are much younger. They've never been part of a continent, never been connected to anything. They're just volcanic peaks, rising from the ocean floor. Same with the Canary Islands, same with Madeira, same with every island in the Atlantic. They're volcanic, they're isolated, they're not remnants of anything. The geology doesn't support Atlantis. The archaeology doesn't support it. The historical records don't support it. Only Plato supports it. And he was writing fiction. Philosophical fiction, not history. But the story won't die. It keeps coming back. New theories, new locations, new evidence that turns out to be nothing. Why? Because we want it to be true. We want there to be mysteries. We want there to be lost knowledge. We want to believe we're part of a bigger story. We want to believe that civilization is older than we think, that humans achieved greatness before, that we're rediscovering rather than discovering. It's romantic, it's exciting, it's hopeful in a weird way. If we did it before, we can do it again. If we lost it all and rebuilt, we're resilient, we're survivors, we're capable of more than we think. But that hope doesn't need Atlantis. We already have that story. It's real, it's documented, it's archaeology. Civilizations have risen and fallen many times. We know about them, we study them, we learn from them. The Bronze Age collapse, the fall of Rome, the Maya collapse, the end of the Indus Valley civilization, real disasters, real losses, real dark ages. We rebuilt after each one. Sometimes it took centuries, sometimes knowledge was lost, sometimes we had to start over, but we did, we always have. That's the real human story, not Atlantis, just us, struggling, failing, rebuilding, learning. Atlantis is a distraction, a beautiful distraction, but a distraction nonetheless. The real mysteries are more interesting, more complex, more worthy of attention. Why did the Bronze Age collapse? We don't fully know. Why did Easter Island civilization fail? Still debating. How did ancient people move massive stones? Still figuring it out. These are real questions with real evidence and real answers we can find through careful study. Atlantis is a dead end, a story, a myth, a philosophical tale that got taken literally. It's okay to let it go, to appreciate it as literature, as philosophy, as a great story, but not as history, not as proof of lost civilizations, not as evidence of anything except human imagination. Plato would probably be amazed. He told a story to make a point about virtue, about hubris, about the dangers of corruption, and here we are, 2,400 years later, still talking about it, still searching for it, still believing it might be real. That's the power of a good story. It outlives its purpose. It takes on a life of its own. It becomes something the author never intended. Atlantis is real as a story, as a myth, as a cultural touchstone, as an idea that captures something about human longing and human hope, but as a place, as a civilization, as proof of ancient advanced cultures. No, it's not there. It never was. The ocean keeps its real secrets, real shipwrecks, real settlements, real evidence of how people lived and died and adapted to changing seas. Those are worth finding, worth studying, worth protecting. Atlantis is a beautiful dream, but it's time to wake up, to look at what's really there, to appreciate the actual mysteries instead of invented ones. The truth is stranger than Atlantis anyway, more complicated, more fascinating, more worthy of wonder. We don't need lost continents to make the past interesting. The past is already interesting, already full of mysteries, already full of stories worth telling, real stories, true stories, stories we can verify and study and learn from. That's where the real adventure is, not in finding Atlantis, but in understanding what actually happened, how people actually lived, what they actually achieved, and what they actually lost. Let's step back for a second. We've been talking about lost cities and sunken islands, Atlantis, Crete, volcanoes, real disasters. All of that is about humans, our stories, our memories, our ruins. But there's a bigger, stranger question sitting in the shadows, one that's even harder to answer. What if something advanced existed before humans at all? Not just before history, not just before writing, but before people who looked like us ever even appeared. Could there have been an advanced civilization millions of years ago that's left no trace we've found? This idea sounds wild, but it pops up all the time. In books, in TV shows, in late-night conversations. Here's the thing. The Earth is old. Really old. Around 4.5 billion years old. That's a number so big it's hard to really picture. Modern humans, people like us, have only been around for about 300,000 years. Civilization, farming, cities, writing, all of that is only about 10,000 years old. So what about all the time before that? Hundreds of millions of years. Billions even. Could something have risen and vanished long before us? Think about this, for a second. If an advanced species, one with language, tools, buildings, had existed millions of years ago, would we know? Would we find their ruins? Or would time erase almost everything, leaving us with nothing but questions? Let's look at the science. First, we have to think about what advanced actually means. Usually when people talk about a lost advanced civilization, they mean something like us, maybe even more advanced. They picture cities, machines, maybe even computers, big buildings, technology, art. So, if there had been a species like that 1 million, 10 million, or 100 million years ago, what would be left? Would anything survive that long? Here's where it gets tricky. Stone tools, for example, can last a long time. We've found stone axes and blades made by early humans more than 2 million years ago, but even these get worn down. Erosion, weather, earthquakes. Nature is always working to break things apart. Now think about buildings. Most. Buildings today are made of concrete, steel, glass, wood, or brick. How long would those last if people just disappeared? It turns out not very long. If you left a modern city alone, plants would start to take over in just a few years. Roads would crack. Trees would grow through the pavement. In 100 years, most houses and wooden buildings would collapse. In 1,000 years, even the tallest skyscrapers would start falling apart. Concrete crumbles, steel rusts, glass breaks. Nature takes everything back. After 10,000 years, almost every trace of our cities would be buried or gone. Only a few things would last. Maybe some stone monuments, some plastics buried deep underground, nuclear waste in sealed containers. But even those wouldn't last forever. Now stretch that out to 1 million years, or 10 million, or 100 million. Earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, glaciers, and shifting continents would erase almost everything. Geologists call this deep time. It's the idea that the Earth is always changing, but on a timescale that's hard for us to imagine. Mountains rise and fall, oceans appear and vanish. Entire continents move around the planet. In 100 million years, the Atlantic Ocean could be gone. Africa could crash into Europe. New mountains could form where there's ocean today. So even if a species built cities on land, the land itself could disappear. It could sink below the sea, or be scraped away by glaciers, or buried under new layers of rock. Let's talk about fossils. When we find dinosaur bones, they're sometimes over 65 million years old. But fossils are rare. Most things that die get eaten, rot, or break down. For something to fossilize, it has to be buried quickly, usually by mud or sand, and then turn to stone over millions of years. Even then, only hard parts fossilize. Bones, teeth, shells, soft things, skin, organs, hair, almost never make it. And if you're looking for traces of something like a city, you'd need that city to be buried and turned to stone. That's even less likely. Archaeologists have found stone tools left by early humans, but we've never found a fossilized building, not from any time, not even from early humans. The ruins we find, like ancient temples or walls, are only thousands, not millions, of years old. Nothing like that has ever been found from before humans appeared. So, is it possible something advanced existed millions of years ago? The odds are tiny, but let's look at what we'd expect to find if it did. First, we might see weird patterns in the rocks, layers that can't be explained by nature, maybe strange metals that don't belong, or chemicals that hint at industry. If a civilization built lots of machines or burned fuel, maybe they'd leave behind pollution. We could look for odd spikes in the fossil record, sudden changes in carbon, or traces of plastics or radioactive elements. Scientists have looked. They call this the Silurian Hypothesis. It's named after the Silurians, reptile people from a British TV show. The idea is simple. If an advanced civilization lived on Earth long before us, would we be able to tell? A few scientists wrote about this in 2018. They said, let's check the rocks, let's check the chemicals, let's see if there are signs of ancient pollution or anything that can't be explained by natural causes. They found that most evidence would vanish. In just a few million years, even plastics and metals would be broken down, buried or recycled by the Earth. Fossils from a civilization would be incredibly rare, almost impossible to find. So, even if there had been a lost industrial age, most traces would be gone. But there are some clues that might survive. For example, if a civilization changed the climate, or left weird chemicals in the rocks, we might see those. If they mined huge amounts of metal, maybe some ores would be missing, or we'd see unusual layers. But so far, nothing like that has ever been found. There are odd things in the geological record. For example, there's the Great Oxidation Event about 2.4 billion years ago. That's when oxygen suddenly appeared in the atmosphere. But scientists think that was caused by tiny bacteria, not by anything advanced. Another example is the PETM, the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. About 56 million years ago, the Earth suddenly got much warmer. There's a spike in carbon in the rocks. Some people have asked, could that be from ancient industry? But the evidence points to volcanoes or natural methane, not machines. When you look closely, all the weird events in Earth's past can be explained by natural causes: asteroids, volcanoes, changes in the sun, movement of the continents. There's no sign of ancient cities or roads or machines. If you dig into the layers of rock, you find fossils of animals and plants. Sometimes you find whole forests turned to coal. Sometimes you find seashells or fish. But you never find plastic or glass or metal that couldn't have formed naturally. What about out-of-place artifacts? People sometimes claim to find strange objects in coal or inside rocks. Things like metal screws, hammers, or even gears. These stories usually fall apart under close study. Most are mistakes, or even hoaxes. Sometimes a rock forms around a modern object, making it look ancient. Sometimes minerals grow in strange shapes, like cubes or spirals that look artificial but are really natural. There are some famous examples. The London hammer, a hammer found in a rock in Texas. The Koso artifact, something that looked like a spark plug in a rock. The Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek device, but only about 2,000 years old, not millions. Each time, scientists found natural explanations, or showed the objects were much younger than claimed. Here's the big thing. If an advanced civilization had really existed millions of years ago, we'd expect to find more than one hammer or one strange rock. We'd find layers of debris, mines, dumps, huge amounts of waste, special metals that don't appear in nature, patterns in the rocks that don't match anything natural. But all the deep layers of Earth show nothing like that. Just fossils of plants and animals, no cities, no tools, no plastics, except what we've put there ourselves. That doesn't mean it's impossible, it just means there's no evidence. And with the way the planet works, even a big civilization could vanish without a trace if enough time passed. Let's talk about the odds. Dinosaurs lived for about 165 million years. That's a huge stretch of time. In all those years, no sign of an advanced dinosaur civilization has ever turned up. No tools, no carved stones, no fossilized cities, just bones, eggs, and tracks. Other animals have been around even longer. Crocodiles, turtles, sharks, none of them ever built anything as far as we can tell. The only creatures we know of who built cities are humans. Some people wonder about octopuses. They're smart, they use tools, they solve puzzles. If the ocean dried up, could octopuses evolve into something like us? Maybe in another 100 million years they could. But right now there's no evidence any sea creature ever built a civilization. Why is that? Maybe it's just really hard to get all the right pieces together. Big brains, hands that can grip and shape things, language, the ability to control fire. All those things had to line up for us to appear. That's why many scientists think advanced civilizations are rare. Even on a planet as old and rich as Earth, it may only happen once. Or maybe it's never happened before at all, but some people still wonder. They ask, if we vanished today, what would aliens find in 100 million years? Would they know we were here? Or would all our cities, our satellites, our roads just be gone? Maybe they'd see a tiny chemical spike, maybe a weird layer in the rocks, maybe nothing at all. It's a humbling thought. Everything we build, everything we do could disappear. The planet keeps going. Mountains rise, seas fall, life changes, but almost nothing survives deep time. That's why, when you look for signs of a lost ancient civilization before humans, you're asking a really hard question. Not just, did it happen, but could we even know if it did? So far the answer is no. There's no proof, no ruins, no tools, no odd chemicals or layers that can't be explained. Just the slow, steady story of life changing over billions of years. Single-celled creatures, plants, fish, dinosaurs, mammals, and finally, us. But here's what's strange. The idea still pulls at us. We want to believe we're not the first, that others came before, that the world has secrets we haven't even imagined. Maybe that's human nature. We're curious. We hate gaps in the story. We invent myths and tales to fill the empty spaces. Sometimes we look backward and see patterns that aren't really there. But science deals with what's left behind. Fossils, rocks, chemicals, patterns in the layers of Earth. These tell us that, as far as we know, we're the first species on this planet to build cities, write stories, travel to the moon. Maybe there were others. Maybe they left no trace. But right now, the evidence just isn't there. And yet, the question remains. Because the past is so deep, and so much has vanished, we can never be 100% sure. There's always a small chance, a tiny sliver of possibility, that something amazing happened long before us, that the Earth holds secrets even deeper than we imagine. So people keep searching, keep wondering, keep hoping for a sign, a fossil, a tool, a city, a message, something that says, you weren't the first, others came before, and maybe, someday, we'll find it. But for now, we're left with mysteries, with what we know and what we can only guess. The story of life on Earth is long, winding, and full of gaps. Maybe that's why it feels so mysterious. Maybe that's why the idea of lost civilizations, even before humans, keeps coming back. And that brings up a new question. If we're the first, what does that mean for us? If we're not, what would it mean to find proof of something before us? Would it change how we see ourselves? Or would it just be another chapter in the world's wild, unfinished story? For now, all we can do is keep looking, keep wondering, and keep telling stories. Because sometimes, the questions matter just as much as the answers. But what about before humans entirely? What if something intelligent existed millions of years ago? Let's go deeper. We've talked about the odds of finding old ruins, tools, or chemicals from a lost civilization. But what about the bigger picture? What does it really take for something advanced to appear at all? If we want to know if deep time could hide a forgotten civilization, we need to look at the history of life itself. What patterns show up? What's rare and what's common? And why does intelligence, or technology, seem so hard to find? Picture the Earth, hundreds of millions of years ago. The continents look different. The air, the oceans, everything is strange to us. Life is here, but it's not what you'd recognize. For most of Earth's history, life has been simple. Just cells floating in water doing their thing. For billions of years, there were no animals, no plants, nothing with eyes or brains. Just tiny things, too small to see, multiplying and changing bit by bit. Here's the thing, life started early. As soon as the planet cooled down enough, living things appeared. Some scientists think it happened around 3.5 billion years ago. That's almost as soon as it was physically possible. The oldest fossils we've found are tiny mats of bacteria, called stromatolites. They look like blobs of rock. Not much to see, really. But they were alive. They grew in shallow seas, soaking up sunlight, making oxygen. For over 2 billion years, bacteria ruled the world. They changed the atmosphere, built up oxygen, and made the planet ready for something new. But nothing complicated showed up for a very long time. No animals, no plants, nothing you'd call advanced. Why? That's one of the great mysteries. It's not that the planet was empty, it's just that simple life is easy, complex life is hard. It takes a lot of special things to line up all at once. You need the right chemicals, the right energy, the right balance, and even then, most attempts fail. Eventually, around 600 million years ago, something changed. Animals appeared, not all at once but in stages. First, soft-bodied things like worms or jellyfish, then creatures with shells. The Cambrian explosion about 540 million years ago was a wild time. Suddenly there were all sorts of new shapes, eyes, legs, mouths, claws. The ocean was full of strange life, most of it nothing like what we see today. But even then, intelligence was nowhere to be found. Most animals just drifted, crawled, or hunted by instinct. No one was building anything. No one was planning ahead. So what does it take for intelligence to appear? Let's break it down. First, you need a nervous system, a way for the body to send signals. Then you need a brain, or something like it, to process those signals. Then you need senses, eyes, ears, maybe even a sense of smell. All of that is rare. Most life doesn't need it. Plants, for example, do just fine without brains. Brains are expensive. In an energy sense, they burn a lot of calories. For most animals, it's easier to stay simple. Eat, move, reproduce, repeat. Why bother with thinking? But a few groups over time started to get smarter. Some fish, some insects, some birds, some mammals, and of course some dinosaurs. But even then, smarter just meant better at finding food or avoiding danger, not making tools, not building anything. Let's talk about the dinosaurs for a minute. They were around for 165 million years. That's longer than mammals have been on the planet. Some were huge, some were tiny. A few, like the raptors and birds, had bigger brains, sharp eyes, clever claws. But as far as we know, none of them ever built a city or a fire. No fossils show tools, artwork, or anything like a society. Why not? Maybe they just didn't need to. Maybe their bodies were already perfect for their world. Or maybe intelligence is just rare, even after life gets complex. It's not the end goal of evolution. It's just one weird path among many. Some scientists have asked, could there have been a hidden branch of dinosaurs or reptiles that got smart? Something that lived in forests or caves, left no bones behind, and vanished without a trace. It sounds cool, but the chances are tiny. Fossils of fossils. All kinds of dinosaurs have been found, from giant sauropods to tiny birds. Nothing shows any sign of fire, tools, or advanced building. And then the asteroid hit. About 66 million years ago, a space rock smashed into Earth. The world changed overnight. Fires, darkness, cold. Most of the dinosaurs died out along with many other animals. The world opened up for something new. That's when mammals started to take over. Small, furry, warm-blooded. For tens of millions of years they just scurried and hid. But slowly some got bigger, smarter, and more adaptable. Monkeys appeared, then apes, then finally humans. But here's the strange part. Even with all that time, intelligence like ours only showed up once. On a planet full of life, for billions of years, only one species made cities, art, and technology. That's not what you'd expect if intelligence was easy. So, what does this mean for the idea of a lost civilization? Well, most of the time life stays simple and even, and when things get complex, intelligence is rare. Technology is even rarer. Let's look at the ocean for a minute. There are smart animals there too, dolphins, whales, octopuses. Some use tools, some have complex songs or ways to talk, but none of them build cities, none make machines. Maybe it's because they live in water where fire doesn't work, or maybe they just never needed to change the world. Octopuses are a fun case. They're clever, solve puzzles, and use shells for shelter. People even call them aliens of the deep. But their bodies are soft and they don't live long, just a few years. They never form big groups or pass down knowledge for generations. So even with brain power, they don't get to technology. It seems like a lot of things have to line up for an advanced civilization to appear. You need a smart brain, hands or something like them, the right environment, a long lifespan, and a way to work together. That's a tough list. There's also the question of time. Even if some animals started getting smarter, it would need millions of years to go from clever to truly advanced. And in that time, disasters can happen. Asteroids, volcanoes, ice ages. Life gets reset, and you start again. Earth has had 5 big mass extinctions. Each one wiped out most life. The biggest, about 250 million years ago, killed up to 90% of all species. That's almost everything. After each disaster, new life took over, but every time it went back to basics. Small, simple, tough survivors. Not smart, not advanced. It's like the planet is always rolling the dice. Sometimes you get big animals, sometimes you get forests, but almost never do you get something that makes technology. Now, some people wonder about shadow biospheres. What if there was a kind of life we just can't detect? Something that doesn't leave fossils or uses chemicals we don't recognize? Could there have been whole kingdoms of life that came and went without us ever knowing? Scientists have looked for this. They check for weird chemicals in old rocks. They look for strange isotopes, special forms of atoms that might come from alien life. So far, nothing. All the life we've found, from the oldest rocks to today, uses the same basic chemistry. But it's a fun idea. Maybe life started more than once. Maybe other forms of life had their shot and vanished before ours ever appeared. Or maybe we just haven't found their traces yet. Let's get even more cosmic for a second. Some writers and thinkers ask, what if life didn't start on Earth at all? What if it came from space? This idea is called panspermia. Maybe a meteor brought tiny living things to our planet, which then took off and evolved. If that's true, there could have been life here before the current line. But again, we see no evidence for something advanced. It's wild to think about. But right now, everything we can see points to a slow, steady climb from simple to complex. No sudden jumps, no hidden high-tech worlds wiped away. There's another angle to this. Let's talk about signals. If there had been an advanced civilization, maybe they left something on purpose, a message or a beacon meant to last for millions of years. Some have called this the message in a bottle idea. Could there be something hidden deep underground, or on the moon, or even in orbit just waiting to be found? Scientists and dreamers have searched. We've scanned for radio signals, checked the surfaces of other planets, even looked for odd things in space, but so far, nothing. Even if someone wanted to leave a sign, it would be hard. Earth is always changing. Anything left on the surface would get buried or destroyed. Only something hidden deep in rock or far from the planet might survive. But we haven't found anything like that. Some people suggest looking for techno-signatures. That's just a fancy way of saying, look for the marks of technology. On Earth, that could mean odd chemicals, strange metals, or even artificial shapes in rock. In space, it could mean strange patterns of light or heat. But we haven't seen anything that can't be explained by nature. So, let's step back. What are the odds? For most of Earth's past, the world was full of microbes, not machines. Complex life took forever to appear. Big brains showed up just once, as far as we know. Technology, even more rare. It's possible that something advanced appeared once before and left no trace. But everything we know says it's unlikely. Life just doesn't work that way, most of the time. But the question keeps coming back. Why? Maybe it's because of how we see ourselves. We want to feel connected to something bigger. We want to imagine hidden stories, lost worlds, forgotten geniuses. It makes Earth feel more mysterious, less ordinary. Or maybe we just hate the idea of being alone. If someone came before us, maybe we're not a fluke. Maybe this is just a pattern, and we're part of a bigger story. But the truth is, life is tough. Survival is hard. Most things that ever lived are gone forever. Most of the survivors just kept it simple. The ones that took risks, got big or smart or weird, didn't always last. That's why when you look at the tree of life, it's full of dead ends. Whole branches that went nowhere. The only branch that made it to cities and space rockets is the one we're on. So, if you're searching for lost civilizations before humans, you have to accept that life's history is full of silence. Long stretches where nothing much happened, and then bursts of change. It's humbling, really. For billions of years, nobody wondered about the stars. Nobody built a fire or shaped a tool or wrote a story, just simple creatures, living and dying. And then, finally, something changed. Not overnight, not even in 1,000,000 years. But slowly, step by step, brains got bigger. Hands got hands, better. Groups got more social. Ideas started to pass from one generation to the next. That's what set us apart. The ability to learn, to share, to build on what others did. That's what makes civilization possible. Some people ask, what if we vanish tomorrow? Would anything we've built last? In a few thousand years, maybe a few things would survive. In a million years, almost nothing. The planet would wipe the slate clean, as it's done before. Maybe that's why the idea of a lost civilization is so haunting. It's not just about mystery, it's about how fragile everything is, how quickly things can be forgotten. But here's another way to look at it. Maybe the real miracle isn't that something advanced could appear again and again. Maybe the miracle is that it ever happened at all, that in all the chaos of Earth's past the right pieces lined up just once to make a species that could look back and wonder, if there was something before us, it's gone. If there wasn't, that makes our moment even more special. We're the ones who get to ask these questions. We're the ones who get to search for meaning and share stories and dream about what might have been. So, the theory goes like this. Life is common, but complexity is rare. Intelligence is even rarer. Technology, almost a miracle. The odds are stacked against it every step of the way. But as long as we're here, we get to look back, to wonder, to keep searching, and maybe, just maybe, to leave some sign for whoever comes next, even if it's 1 billion years from now. Now let's push the question even further. What about before complex life at all? Before animals, before plants, before anything with a brain? Is it possible that something truly strange, something beyond our imagination once called this planet home? Let's try to get to the real heart of the question. Why is intelligence so rare? Why did it only show up once on Earth, as far as we know? And what does that mean for the odds of a lost civilization, hidden somewhere deep in time? To answer that, we have to get a bit theoretical. But don't worry, I'll keep it simple. Think about evolution as a giant experiment. It's been running for billions of years. There are no instructions, no plan, just random changes, one after another, with nature picking what works best in each moment. Sometimes those changes lead to new ways of living. Sometimes they go nowhere. Now here's the thing. Most of the time, evolution takes the easy path. Simple designs, simple habits. Single-celled creatures, like bacteria, are the champions of this game. They don't need brains or teamwork. They just float, eat, divide, and keep on going. They've been doing this for nearly 4 billion years. Complex life, that's the real twist. It needs lots of things to happen together. Cells have to team up and form bodies. Those bodies need to sense the world and react to it. That means you need nerves, muscles, maybe even eyes. Every step is a challenge. Each one can fail. And if something works, it has to work for a long time, not just for a single animal, but for its children, and their children too. Let's look at some numbers. For about 3.5 billion years, life was stuck at the single-cell stage. No animals, no plants, just tiny things living in water. Then, around 600 million years ago, things started to change. Bodies appeared. Not all at once, but in stages. First, soft blobs. Later, shells and skeletons. But even then, most animals weren't much smarter than a jellyfish. So why does complexity take so long? It turns out it's not just about luck. There are real barriers. To go from a single cell to a creature with nerves and muscles, you need a whole army of new genes. You need ways for cells to talk to each other. You need energy, lots of it. And even if you get all that, you have to survive in a world full of danger. There's something else. Every time life gets more complex, it also gets more fragile. Big animals need more food. They take longer to grow up. They can't handle sudden changes as well as bacteria can. That means when a disaster hits, like an asteroid or an ice age, the simple things usually survive. The complex ones often don't. Let's talk about brains. Brains are special. They're like a command center. But they're expensive. Not just in money, but in energy. Your brain uses about 20% of your daily calories, even when you're just sitting around. For most animals, brains don't pay off. If you're a worm, you don't need to solve puzzles. You just need to wiggle, eat, and hide. There's a pattern here. Brains only show up when they really help. If you're a predator hunting fast prey, a bigger brain can give you an edge. If you live in groups, brains help you remember friends and enemies. But even then, most animals stop at just smart enough. So, why did humans get so clever? Here's what scientists think. First, We had hands that could grip and shape things. That let us use tools. Second, we lived in groups. That meant we needed to talk, share, and remember who did what. Third, we learned to control fire. That gave us more food and more time to think. Each step built on the last, like climbing a ladder. But here's the twist. None of these steps had to happen. Each one was lucky. Each one could have failed. If you rewound Earth's history and let it play again, there's a good chance we wouldn't be here at all. That's why many scientists say intelligence is not the goal of evolution. It's just one path. Most life doesn't take it. Even when it does, it usually stops far short of building cities or rockets. Now let's add another layer. For a civilization to appear, brains aren't enough. You need culture. You need to pass down skills and ideas. You need language or something like it. And you need stability. Enough time without disaster, so knowledge can build up. Think about how many things could have gone wrong. A giant volcano could wipe out the cleverest animals. An ice age could freeze the planet. Disease could spread. Even a single unlucky mutation could push things off course. In the story of life, most experiments don't last. Most almosts never get a second chance. Some people wonder, could other animals have made it if they'd had more time? Maybe dolphins or elephants or crows. They're smart. They use tools. They have social lives and even traditions. But they never went past a certain point. Why not? Part of the answer is environment. Dolphins live in water. They can't build fires or shape metal. Elephants are big, but their trunks aren't great for detailed work. Crows can use sticks, but they don't live long enough to pass on complex skills to a lot of generations. So, it's not just about brains. It's about the whole package. Hands or some way to shape the world. Long lives to learn and teach. Groups to share ideas. A safe enough world to let new things grow. Here's another angle. What about time? Earth is old. Very old. The dinosaurs ruled for 165 million years. That's more than 25 times longer than humans have had cities. If intelligence was likely, shouldn't it have happened more than once? Shouldn't we see traces of other civilizations deep in the rocks? But we don't. We see long periods where nothing much changes. Then suddenly a new group takes over, but even then it's usually just more of the same. Eat, move, survive, not build, learn, create. Some thinkers call this the Great Filter. It's a way of saying there are barriers in the path from simple life to advanced civilization. Most things get stuck somewhere along the way. Maybe it's at the single-cell stage. Maybe it's at the get-a-brain stage. Maybe it's at the work-together stage. Only rarely does a species make it all the way through. And here's the sobering part. Even when a civilization appears, it might not last long. Our own history is just a blink of an eye. Cities are about 6,000 years old. That's nothing compared to the age of the planet. If you zoomed out and looked at Earth's timeline as a 24-hour clock, modern humans show up in the last few seconds before midnight. So, what does all this mean for the idea of a lost advanced civilization before us? The odds are stacked against it. Not because it's impossible, but because so many things have to go right, and almost always they don't. Here's a thought experiment. Imagine you could roll the dice 1,000,000 times, each one representing a planet like Earth. Most of the time, you'd get bacteria. Sometimes you'd get plants and animals. Rarely you'd get something with a brain. Almost never you'd get a civilization. But let's say, just once some group made it far enough. Maybe they built cities, or even machines, if they lasted only a few thousand years, and then vanished. Would we ever know? Maybe not. The planet recycles itself, rocks get crushed, mountains rise and fall, oceans come and go, traces disappear, especially after millions of years. That's why some people say, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Just because we haven't found anything doesn't mean it never happened. But based on what we do know, how hard it is for intelligence to appear, how rare technology is, how fast traces vanish, most scientists think it's very unlikely. Still, the question is worth asking. It helps us see how special our moment is. It reminds us that life is not a straight line, but a wild, twisting path with no promises. Let's talk about something called convergent evolution. This is when different groups of animals evolve similar solutions to the same problem. Wings, for example, have evolved in birds, bats, and insects. Eyes have appeared in many different groups, so if big brains were really useful, wouldn't they have popped up more often? But they didn't. Most animals don't need them. Even the clever ones, like octopuses or parrots, stay at the smart animal level. They don't build or write or farm. There seems to be a wall that's hard to cross. Some people think, maybe we're missing something. Maybe there was a forgotten branch of life that got smart millions of years ago. Something totally different from us. Maybe their bodies were made of something that doesn't fossilize. Maybe their tools were made of wood or bone lost to time. It's fun to imagine. But the more we look, the more it seems like nature prefers simplicity. Most of the time, being clever just isn't worth it. Here's another theory. Maybe intelligence is a fluke, not a rule. Just a rare accident, not the end goal of evolution. If that's true, then our own existence is a lucky break. We're the winners of a cosmic lottery. Let's get a bit philosophical. Why do we even care about lost civilizations? Maybe it's because deep down we want to know we're not alone. We want to believe that what we've built isn't just a one-off, but part of something bigger. Maybe we hope that intelligence will keep appearing over and over, given enough time. But the story so far says otherwise. For all the ages of life on Earth, we only have one example. Us. Not because the Earth didn't have time or space or opportunities, but because the steps are so hard, so unlikely, that almost nobody makes it. Let's look at another angle. Energy. To build a civilization, you need to control energy. Fire is the first big step. Without it, you can't cook, can't make tools, can't change the world. But fire is rare. Only a few animals ever learned to use it, and as far as we know, only humans mastered it. After fire, you need farming, or some other way to get lots of food. That lets people settle down, build bigger groups, have specialists, people who don't have to hunt or gather but can invent, teach or lead. That's when cities start, that's when real civilization appears. But every part of this chain is fragile. If one link breaks, the whole thing comes apart. That's why, even after millions of years of animal life, civilization is brand new. Here's a story. Around 75,000 years ago, a supervolcano called Toba erupted in Indonesia. It was one of the biggest eruptions ever. Some scientists think it nearly wiped out early humans. Maybe only a few thousand survived. If things had gone just a little differently, maybe our whole species would have vanished. No cities, no stories, no science. That's how close we came to nothing. That's how thin the line is between civilization and silence. So when people ask if there was a lost civilization before us, the answer is maybe, but probably not. Not because it's impossible, but because it's so hard. The path to intelligence is steep, full of traps and dead ends. Most of the time, life takes the easy way. Stay small, stay simple, survive. But here's the other side. The universe is huge. There are billions of planets. Maybe somewhere out there, the dice rolled differently. Maybe another world had its own humans, or something like them. Maybe they too wondered if they were alone. On Earth, though, we're the only ones as far as we know. That makes our story precious. It makes our questions matter. Let's circle back to the big idea. For most of history, life was simple. Complexity is rare. Intelligence is even rarer. Civilization, the rarest of all. If there was a lost civilization before us, it would have had to beat the odds. Not just once, but over and over. It would have had to survive disasters, outsmart extinction, and leave some mark behind. So far, we haven't found that mark. That doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means it's not likely. But the fact that we're asking the question at all says something about us. We're curious. We want to know where we came from, and who else might have shared this planet. Maybe that's the real gift of intelligence, not just to build, but to wonder. Now let's take this question to the next level. If intelligence is so rare here, what about out there? Are we really alone? Or are there other civilizations somewhere in the stars asking the same questions? That's a whole new mystery. And it leads us straight to one of the biggest puzzles of all time, the Fermi paradox. Let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture for a moment. We've been talking about Earth's timeline and the odds of intelligence popping up. But there's another layer to this puzzle. The universe itself. We're not the only planet out there. In fact, there are billions of planets just in our own galaxy. Some are older than Earth. Some are younger. Some might be like ours in ways we can't even imagine. This brings us to a huge famous question. It's called the Fermi paradox. And it goes like this. If the universe is so big and there are so many chances for life, where is everybody? Why don't we see signs of other civilizations either out in space or in our own past? It sounds simple, but it gets deep fast. Let's break it down. First, space is old. The universe is about 13.8 billion years old. Earth is only 4.5 billion years old. That means there were planets forming for billions of years before ours even existed. If life is common and intelligence isn't impossible, then you'd expect some planets to get a head start, maybe 1 billion or 2 billion years ahead of us. Now, think about what that means. If another civilization had even 1 million-year head start, they'd be so far ahead of us we can't even picture it. Imagine the difference between us and the earlier stone tool users. Now, multiply that by 1,000. That's what a 1,000,000-year gap looks like. And here's the thing. Space travel, at least in theory, isn't impossible. We've sent probes to other planets. We've bounced signals off the Moon and Mars. If a civilization had enough time and enough technology, you'd think they could spread out. Maybe not across the whole galaxy, but at least to nearby stars. So, the big question. If even one advanced civilization appeared somewhere in the galaxy a long time ago, why don't we see any signs? No giant structures, no strange signals, no alien probes, nothing. This is the heart of the Fermi paradox. The universe is big, the universe is old, the odds seem high, but the results so far are zero. Let's look at some numbers. Our galaxy, the Milky Way, has about 100 billion stars. Most of those stars have planets, and a lot of those planets are in what's called the habitable zone. That means they could have liquid water, something life on Earth needs. Even if only a tiny fraction of those planets have life, and an even smaller fraction develop intelligence, there should still be thousands, maybe millions, of civilizations. But we don't see them, not even one. Why? People have come up with lots of ideas. Some are simple. Maybe we just haven't looked hard enough. Maybe the signals are there, but we don't know how to spot them. Or maybe they're using technology we can't even imagine, something totally different from radio waves or light. Others say maybe civilizations are out there, but they don't want to be found. They might hide on purpose, like animals hiding in the forest. Maybe they're afraid of other, more dangerous aliens. Or maybe they just want to be left alone. Then there are darker ideas. Maybe civilizations tend to destroy themselves. Maybe once you get technology, it's only a matter of time before you wipe yourself out. War, pollution, disease, take your pick. This is sometimes called the Great Filter. It's the idea that something is stopping civilizations from lasting long enough to spread out. Or maybe the really hard part is just starting. Maybe life is common, but intelligence is rare. Or maybe intelligence is common, but making technology is rare. Or maybe, even if you get technology, space travel is just too hard. The distances are huge. The energy needed is more than any civilization can handle. Let's get back to Earth for a second. When we look for signs of lost civilizations, we're looking for things we'd recognize. Buildings, metal, writing. But what if something really different existed before us? What if their technology didn't leave the same marks? It's possible. Maybe they used materials that don't last. Maybe they lived in places now deep under the ocean, or buried under miles of rock. Maybe their traces are mixed up with natural rocks and we just can't tell the difference. But here's an important point. The odds of all those things happening, and leaving no trace at all, are low. Not impossible, but low. We've dug up giant bones from dinosaurs, tiny shells from before the dinosaurs, pollen from ancient plants. If a big, widespread civilization had existed, we'd expect to find something. Now, let's zoom back out to the universe. If alien civilizations are out there, why haven't we seen even the tiniest hint? That's the puzzle. Some people say, maybe we're the first. Maybe it just took this long for intelligence to appear, and we're the lucky ones who got here first. If that's true, it's a lonely thought, but also a hopeful one. It means we could set the tone for the whole galaxy. Others think, maybe civilizations are common, but they're all short-lived. They rise, they fall, and their traces vanish fast. In space, things get erased over time. Planets get hit by asteroids. Stars explode. Even giant structures could be wiped out after millions of years. Or maybe the universe is filled with life, but most of it is simple, single-celled like bacteria. Or maybe animal level like fish or insects. Only rarely. Does it leap to something that can build, invent, and talk to the stars? Let's talk about timescales. Human civilization is maybe 10,000 years old if you count early farming. Cities are only about 6,000 years old. Our whole story is a blink compared to the age of the Earth, let alone the universe. If another civilization appeared 1,000,000 years ago and lasted just 5,000 years, the odds that their signals would cross paths with ours are tiny. It's like two people shouting in a giant stadium at different times, hoping to hear each other. Space is big. Time is long. Even if there were many civilizations, they could all be separated by huge distances or huge gaps in time. Another idea is the zoo hypothesis. It says maybe aliens know we're here, but they're watching silently. Like scientists watching animals in the wild, they don't want to disturb us. It sounds a bit like science fiction, but it's one way to explain the silence. Some people point out, maybe we're just too early. Maybe the universe is still young, and most civilizations haven't had time to appear yet. Stars will keep burning for billions of years. Maybe intelligence will be common in the far future, but right now it's rare. There's also the idea that maybe we're looking in the wrong way. We use radio telescopes to listen for signals, but what if advanced civilizations use something else, like lasers, or signals we haven't thought of yet? Or maybe they communicate in ways we can't even dream up. Let's try a different angle. On Earth we see lots of examples of convergent evolution. That means different animals end up with similar solutions, like wings or eyes, or even social groups. But as we saw, big brains and technology only appeared once. So if intelligence was likely, wouldn't it have happened more than once, here or elsewhere? Or if it happened somewhere else, wouldn't we see at least a few clear signs? Some scientists think maybe the steps to get from life to intelligence are just too many. Each step might be unlikely on its own, and when you multiply all those unlikely steps together, it gets almost impossible. That's why the great filter idea worries people. It means there are roadblocks, and we don't know where they are. Maybe we already passed the hardest ones, or maybe the really hard step is ahead of us. Let's talk about filters for a minute. Imagine a long hallway with lots of locked doors. Each door is a challenge, getting from simple life to complex life, then to animals, then to big brains, then to technology. If most planets get stuck behind one of those doors, very few will make it all the way through. So, which door is the hardest? Is it the leap from single cell to many cells? Is it the leap to language or to fire or to farming? Or is it surviving long enough to spread out into space? Here's another twist. It's possible the great filter isn't behind us, but ahead. Maybe advanced civilizations always wipe themselves out. Maybe technology is a trap. As soon as you get it, you get the tools to destroy yourself. If that's true, maybe that's why we don't see anyone else. They all vanished. But maybe, just maybe, some civilizations did make it. Maybe they're out there, but they're quiet. Maybe they don't use radio. Maybe they're made of something totally different from us. Or maybe they're so advanced, we wouldn't even recognize their signals. Think about ants and humans. We walk past ant nests every day, but we don't try to talk to them. If there are civilizations out there as far ahead of us as we are ahead of ants, maybe they see us, but don't bother to say hello. Let's get practical for a moment. We've been listening to space for signals since the 1960s. That's just 60 years out of the billions of years the universe has existed. That's like dipping a cup into the ocean for 1 second and saying, I didn't see any fish, so there are no fish in the sea. Maybe we just haven't listened long enough, or in the right way. Maybe we're missing the big picture. There's another idea called rare earth. It says maybe our planet is special, not just because of life, but because of all the tiny things that lined up to make civilization possible. The right kind of star, the right distance, a big moon to steady the planet, plate tectonics to recycle nutrients, a magnetic field to protect us from space radiation. Maybe all those things have to come together, and it just doesn't happen often. If that's true, the odds of another Earth with another civilization might be lower than we think. But the universe is huge. Even if the odds are 1 in a billion, there could still be hundreds or thousands of civilizations out there. We just haven't met them yet. Let's tie this back to the idea of a lost civilization on Earth. If we can't even find other civilizations in space, maybe it's not so strange that we don't find one in our own past. The steps are hard, the odds are long, and the traces fade fast, but we keep looking. We look for signals from the stars, we look for clues in the rocks, because deep down, we want to know if we're alone. Here's a thought that keeps coming up. Maybe the universe is quiet, not because nobody's out there, but because everyone is listening, waiting for someone else to speak first. Like a room full of people, all silent, waiting for someone to break the ice. Or maybe we're just in the quiet part of the galaxy. Maybe there are busy, noisy places out there, but we're too far away to hear. Some people wonder if life comes in waves. Maybe there are bursts of civilizations, then long silent stretches. Or maybe life is just getting started, and we're the early birds. There's also a chance that we're not looking for the right things. Maybe we're too focused on finding life like us, carbon-based, water-loving, city-building. Maybe life can be made of different stuff, in different places, with different ways of thinking. Let's imagine for a second. What if there was a civilization that lived in the clouds of a gas giant, or one that lived in the deep oceans under the ice of a far moon? Their traces might be totally invisible to us. We might not even know what to look for. Or, what if advanced civilizations turn inward? Maybe they live in virtual worlds, using tiny energy, sending no signals at all. Maybe the future of intelligence isn't out among the stars, but deep inside. Here's something else to think about. We often picture aliens as being curious, like us. But what if they're not? What if they don't care about exploring or sending signals or building giant monuments? Maybe they're content just to exist. Back to the Fermi paradox. Some people find it comforting. It means we're rare, maybe even special. Others find it scary. It means the universe is empty, or that something bad happens to civilizations before they can spread. But maybe the answer is simple. Maybe it just takes a long, long time for intelligence to appear, and we're among the first. Or maybe we're not, and we just haven't heard from the others yet. There's a kind of beauty in not knowing. It gives us room to wonder, to imagine, to dream. Now let's bring it back down to Earth. We've looked at the universe, the odds, the silence. But what about us? If our own civilization vanished, what would survive? What traces would we leave behind, and for how long? That's a whole new question, and it might help us see why the past is so hard to read. Okay, let's do something kind of weird. Imagine the world is empty. No humans, no animals, just trees, rocks, and rivers. Then, out of nowhere, a group of explorers from another planet shows up. They walk around, take samples, and try to figure out if anyone ever lived here before. Sounds simple, right? But it's not easy at all. Now flip it. What if we're the explorers? Not on a new planet, but on our own Earth. We're digging, searching, and trying to answer this question. If an advanced civilization lived here millions of years ago, would we even know? It seems like we'd notice. You might think, hey, if there were cities, we'd see the ruins. We'd find metal, plastic, bones, or even trash. But the truth is trickier. Earth is not a museum. It's more like a giant eraser. Time, weather, and life itself work together to wipe away almost everything. Let's walk through what happens to our stuff after we're gone. Not in 100 years, or even 10,000. Let's imagine 1,000,000 years into the future. What would be left of us? Start with the obvious things. Glass skyscrapers, highways, cars, and bridges. At first they'd stand tall, empty and silent. But rain, snow, and sun would wear them down fast. Plants would break through the cracks. Rust would eat away at metal beams. In 1,000 years, most buildings would collapse. In 10,000 years, forests would cover the ruins. In 100,000 years, almost nothing would be left above ground. Even our biggest things fade away. Think about Mount Rushmore. It's carved out of solid rock. But wind and water wear down even mountains. After 7 million years, the faces would barely be visible. After 10 million years, maybe gone altogether. What about plastics and chemicals? Here's the thing. Some plastics might last a long time, maybe hundreds of thousands of years buried underground, but sunlight breaks them down. Bacteria and fungus slowly eat them. Even the toughest plastics eventually turn into tiny pieces, then vanish. Metal is even worse. Iron rusts. Aluminum and copper turn into powder. Gold and platinum can last longer, but they're rare. Most of our metal would disappear in a blink, geologically speaking. Now, think about fossils. Fossils are rare. For every 1,000,000 animals that live, maybe one gets fossilized. The rest rot, burn, or get eaten. The odds that a city or a whole civilization would leave fossils are tiny. Archaeologists have found ancient tools and bones because they were buried in just the right spot. Dry caves, deep mud, or volcanic ash can sometimes freeze things in time. But most artifacts never get that lucky. So if all our cities vanished, and only a few pieces got buried deep, Future explorers might miss us completely. They could dig for years and never find a single trace. Now let's zoom out and think bigger. What about clues in the rocks? Could a whole civilization change the planet in a way that lasts for millions of years? It turns out, yes. But the evidence is subtle. For example, take the plastic layer. In some places, plastic has started mixing with sand and rock. Geologists call this plastiglomerate. If you were to dig in the distant future, you might find a strange layer full of melted plastic chunks. That's a weird, unnatural sign, something that doesn't belong in normal rocks. Or think about nuclear tests. Since the 1940s, humans have set off hundreds of nuclear bombs. These left behind special chemicals and radioactive isotopes. Some of them, like plutonium-244, have a half-life of 80 million years. That means, even after everything else disappears, there might be a thin line in the rocks that says, someone was here. There's also a spike in certain metals, like lead, mercury, and rare earth elements. Our factories and cars put these into the air and water. Over time, they settle into mud and soil. If you drill deep enough, you might see a sudden jump in these metals, right at the time humans appeared. But here's the tricky part. Nature makes weird things too. Volcanoes, meteor strikes, and big fires can leave similar marks. If you found a strange layer in the rocks, it might not mean civilization. It could mean a giant volcano exploded, or a meteor crashed into Earth, so the signs are there. But they're easy to miss, and easy to mix up with natural events. Let's look at real examples. There's something called the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. It happened about 56 million years ago. The planet suddenly got much hotter. In the rocks you see a spike in carbon, a change in minerals, and even extinctions. Some scientists call it a carbon spike. It looks a bit like what we're doing now with climate change. Now imagine you're an alien scientist. You show up millions of years after that event. You find a layer with weird carbon, dead animals, and changed minerals. Would you think a civilization did this? Or would you say, nature had a bad day? That's the problem. The signs of civilization and the signs of disaster can look almost the same. Let's talk about another test, industrial fingerprints. This means the tiny traces we leave behind when we make stuff. For example, synthetic chemicals like PCBs, plastics, and pesticides. These don't exist in nature. If you find them in rocks, it's a sure sign someone was making things. But these chemicals break down over time. They might last 1 million years if buried deep, but not forever. Now think about energy. Humans burn fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas. This leaves a clear mark. The amount of carbon in the air changes. Plants and animals die off. Oxygen levels fall. In the rocks, you get a dark band full of dead stuff and odd chemicals. This is called a black shale. There are black shales from over 200 million years ago. Did they come from ancient civilizations burning oil? Almost nobody thinks so, but the rocks themselves can't tell us for sure. What about big bones or skeletons? You'd think we'd find dinosaur cities or fossilized tools if there had been a civilization before us. But bones don't last long unless they're buried by just the right mud or lava. Plus, erosion, earthquakes, and shifting land bury or destroy almost everything on the surface. If you dig into the age of dinosaurs, you don't find buildings or roads. You find bones, teeth, and sometimes footprints. The same could be true for any lost civilization. If they ever existed, their bones and tools could have been crushed, melted, or washed away. Let's talk about deep time. Earth's surface is always changing. Continents move, mountains rise and fall, oceans appear and vanish. In just a few million years, whole landscapes are erased. If a city stood on land that later sank beneath the ocean, it would get buried under mud, then rock. Maybe someday a mountain might rise, and those rocks come back to the surface. But by then, it would be almost impossible to recognize what you're looking at. And here's another twist. Most of the Earth's crust is recycled every few 100 million years. Plate tectonics, giant plates moving under the ground, drag old rock deep into the planet where it melts and becomes new rock. Any evidence on the surface gets carried down and destroyed. Now, let's look at the ocean. It covers over 70% of our planet. Most of the deep sea floor is less than 200 million years old. That's because new crust forms at ridges and old crust gets swallowed at trenches. Anything built on the deep ocean floor gets buried, crushed, or melted in a blink, geologically speaking. What about places that don't change much? Some deserts and mountain valleys have rocks that are billions of years old. If a civilization left behind stone carvings or pyramids in one of these places, maybe they'd last longer. But erosion, sand, and wind still wear them down, and even the hardest stone breaks apart over time. Here's a simple test. Think about the oldest things we've found from past humans. The oldest buildings are about 12,000 years old. The oldest cave art is maybe 40,000 years old. The oldest stone tools are around 3 million years old. But tools last because they're stone and they were buried in the right place. Most things disappear much faster. Let's look at a famous example, the pyramids of Egypt. They're over 4,000 years old, but even they are slowly crumbling. The desert helps preserve them, but wind and sand still wear away at the stone. If nobody cared for them, in a few 100,000 years, they'd be gone. Now think about what happens if we stop maintaining our cities. In just a few decades, plants take over, roofs fall in, roads crack and vanish. In 1,000 years, forests wipe out almost everything. In 10,000 years, you'd never know we were here, unless you dug deep. So, what would really last? Maybe a few things. Ceramics, like plates and cups, can survive for thousands of years. They're tough and don't rot. Some might survive for 1,000,000 years if buried in the right place. But if nobody's looking in the right spot, they'd never find them. Think about the Antikythera mechanism. It's a complex bronze machine from ancient Greece, found on a shipwreck. It's over 2,000 years old. We only found it because a diver stumbled on the wreck. If it had sunk in a different place, or if nobody looked, we'd never know it existed. The same goes for lost civilizations. If they left anything behind, we'd have to be incredibly lucky to find it. Most traces would be tiny, scattered, or buried deep. Now let's ask another question. Could we spot an advanced civilization if it wasn't like us at all? What if they didn't build cities? What if they lived in forests or underground or underwater? Maybe their technology didn't use metal or stone. Maybe it was made of wood, bone, or something that rots. In that case, almost nothing would survive for millions of years. Maybe a few weird chemicals or odd shapes in the rocks, but not much else. So when we look for evidence, we're really searching for a needle in a haystack, and the haystack keeps getting bigger as time goes on. Let's talk about strange things we have found. Sometimes people find objects or marks in rocks that don't seem to belong. They're called out-of-place artifacts. Some are hoaxes, like fake coins or carved stones. Others are mistakes, natural rocks that just look odd. Rarely, something real turns up, like a fossilized bone with cut marks, or a tool buried deep underground. But so far, nothing has shown clear proof of a lost advanced civilization before humans. No ancient engines, no alien writing, no buried cities millions of years old. Still, scientists keep looking. They drill deep into the earth. They study rocks from the ocean floor. They check for strange chemicals, odd metals, and unusual patterns. Some researchers even study ice cores from Antarctica and Greenland. These are giant cylinders of ice, drilled from deep under the surface. They can show changes in the air, dust, and chemicals going back almost 1,000,000 years. If something weird happened, a big spike in pollution, or a sudden burst of heat, it would show up in the ice. So far, the only big changes match up with things we already know about: volcanoes, meteor impacts, and climate shifts. No sign of lost cities or ancient machines. Let's talk about another angle, the Silurian Hypothesis. That's a fun name for a simple idea. It asks, could we spot a civilization that lived hundreds of millions of years ago? The name comes from a science fiction story about lizard people in the Silurian period. A few scientists tried to answer this for real. They looked at what would last the longest: chemicals, metals, and weird patterns in the rocks. Their answer? Maybe. But only if the civilization was big enough to change the whole planet. For example, if they burned a lot of coal or oil, you'd see a spike in carbon. If they made weird chemicals, you might find them in the rocks. If they dug up lots of metals, you might see a sudden jump in those elements. But even then, nature could wipe away most of the evidence. Over millions of years, rocks get buried, melted, and recycled. Oceans rise and fall, mountains crumble. Now, let's flip it again. Imagine, millions of years from now, another species digs into Earth looking for us. What would they find? A thin layer of weird chemicals, maybe a few strange metals, some fossils of rats, cows, and chickens, since we raised billions of them. Maybe a few scattered plastic bits melted into rock, they'd have to guess what those things meant. Did a giant fire burn the planet? Did a volcano explode? Or was there a civilization here? That's the heart of the mystery. Even with all our science, we can't be sure what the signs mean. Let's talk about another kind of evidence, mass extinctions. Every so often, lots of species vanish all at once. The most famous is when the dinosaurs died out 66 million years ago. A giant asteroid hit Earth. Fires, darkness, and cold wiped out most life. But there are other extinction events. Some are linked to volcanoes, others to climate change. In the rocks, you see a sudden loss of fossils, a change in the soil, and odd chemicals. If you didn't know about the asteroid, you might wonder, was there a civilization here? Did something else cause this? That's the problem. The signs of disaster and civilization can look the same. So what would count as real proof? Maybe a fossilized machine, or writing carved into ancient stone, or a city buried deep in rock. But these things are incredibly rare. In all our digging and searching, we haven't found anything like that from before humans. Instead, we find the same things: bones, shells, and rocks shaped by nature. Still, the search goes on. Scientists keep looking for clues. Every year they find something new, a new fossil, a new cave painting, a new tool. But so far, nothing points to a lost high-tech civilization before us. Now, let's look at why some people believe in lost civilizations anyway. Sometimes, it's because of gaps in our knowledge. There are still mysteries, lost cities, unexplained ruins, weird carvings. But most of these turn out to be from humans, just older than we thought. Other times, it's because of legends and stories. Every culture has tales of lost worlds. Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu. These are fun to think about, but there's no hard evidence for them. Sometimes people point to ancient maps or old stories about floods and disasters. But when scientists check, the dates don't line up. The rocks and fossils tell a different story. There's also a human reason. We like to imagine we're not the first. It gives us a sense of mystery and maybe a warning. If others came before us and vanished, what does that mean for us? Let's sum up the evidence. Earth is good at hiding things. Time and nature erase almost everything. If a civilization lived millions of years ago, most traces would be gone. Maybe a few weird chemicals or strange metal spikes would survive in the rocks. But those can look a lot like natural events. So far, scientists haven't found anything that can't be explained by nature or known human history. No hidden cities, no ancient machines, no alien writing. But the search isn't over. New tools like better drills and scanners let us look deeper than ever before. Maybe one day, we'll find something that changes everything. For now, the evidence is thin. Earth is old, time is long, and most traces fade away, but the mystery is still there, waiting. And sometimes, not knowing is just as fascinating as having all the answers. So, after all this digging, searching, and guessing, we're left with a puzzle. If there was a lost civilization before us, it's hidden well. Maybe too well to ever find. Or maybe we're the first after all. And now, let's step back and ask, what does all this mean? What should we take from this great mystery? Let's step back and really look at what's left when the dust settles. After all the digging, all the guesses, all the wild stories, what does it actually mean to search for a lost civilization before humans? Why do we care so much? And what does it say about us that we keep asking? First, here's something to chew on. People have always wondered if they're alone, not just in the universe, but even here on Earth. It's a deep, almost ancient feeling. Maybe it comes from sitting around a fire hearing strange noises in the dark. Maybe it's built into the way our brains work. We look at empty places and wonder who might have been there before us. But this mystery, were there others before us, maybe even smarter or more advanced, is different. It's not just about being alone. It's about time, about how small we are in the face of millions, even billions of years. Most of human history is just a blink compared to the age of the planet, so it's natural to ask, are we really the first? Now let's talk about why this question is so hard to answer. We already saw that the Earth erases almost everything, but there's another layer. It's about what we expect to find. Think about what advanced even means. When we say an advanced civilization, most people picture cities, machines, maybe even spaceships. But that's just us, our style of being advanced. What if advanced looked totally different? What if it meant living in balance with nature, or using technology we wouldn't even recognize? For example, say a species learned to shape the world using sound or light, or things we can't even imagine. Maybe they didn't build towers or cars at all. Their footprints could be invisible to us. If their tools were made of something that breaks down fast, we'd never spot them. Maybe they even left Earth on purpose, cleaning up after themselves as they went. No trash, no buildings, no clues. This idea can sound a bit wild, but it's worth thinking about. Our whole search is shaped by what we expect to find. If we only look for stone, metal, or plastic, we might miss everything else. Here's another twist. Maybe advanced doesn't mean what we think. Imagine a world where the smartest species decided not to build anything at all. Maybe they saw what big cities did to the land and chose a different path. Maybe their wisdom was knowing when to stop, not just when to invent a new thing. So, when we look for lost civilizations, we're really looking for versions of ourselves. We want to find someone who thought, built, and lived the way we do. But if they were different, we might walk right past their traces and never know. Now, let's talk about the way we see time itself. Most of us think in years, maybe centuries. We picture the past as a straight line. First the dinosaurs, then mammoths, then humans. But Earth doesn't work like that. Time isn't neat or tidy. Whole ages come and go, leaving almost nothing behind. This is what makes the idea of deep time so strange. Imagine an old city like Rome. It's got layers, old bricks, new buildings, streets built on top of older streets. Now, zoom out. Think about the planet as a whole, with its own layers, rock, soil, fossils, even plastic. Most layers get mixed up, crushed, or melted. In 1,000,000 years, the world we know will be buried deep, twisted and broken by heat and pressure. If you could travel that far into the future, you'd see a planet almost brand new. Most of our history would be erased. So, if another civilization lived here millions of years ago, their traces would be even deeper, or long gone. It's like trying to find a single page from a burned book in a pile of ashes after a rainstorm. Now, let's get into the theories people have come up with. Some folks believe in cyclical history, the idea that civilizations rise, fall, and rise again. They think there could have been many waves of smart life on Earth. Maybe we're just the latest in a long line. This idea pops up in myths and stories all over the world. Ancient India talks about yugas, vast cycles of time, each with its own people and cultures. The Greeks had the story of Atlantis, a world that rose, fell, and was lost to the sea. Even in modern times, people love to imagine hidden worlds, lost under deserts or oceans. But when we check the rocks, the fossils, the layers, we don't see much to back this up. The gaps are huge. Between the dinosaurs and us, there's a long, empty stretch. If there was a civilization, it left almost nothing behind. Still, the idea sticks. Why? Maybe it comforts us, or maybe it warns us. If others came before and vanished, what does that mean for us? Could we vanish too and be forgotten? Here's another theory. Maybe the past was stranger than we think, but not because of lost cities. Maybe life itself was advanced in ways we can't imagine. For example, there are fossils of giant insects, huge forests, and even strange footprints that don't match any known animal. Some people wonder if these are clues. Maybe there was a kind of intelligence we don't recognize, a world run by giant bugs or huge plants, or something totally alien to us. No skyscrapers, no machines, just a different kind of mind shaping the world. It sounds like science fiction, but it's really a reminder of how little we know. The more we study the past, the weirder it gets. We find new fossils, new chemicals, new mysteries every year. Let's talk about technology for a minute. We always imagine progress as a straight line. Stone tools, fire, metal, electricity, computers. But what if it didn't work that way? What if a past civilization went in a different direction? Maybe they focused on biology or language or something we can't even dream up. For example, think about dolphins or octopuses. They're smart, but they don't build things like we do. Maybe there was once a species that lived in water, or underground, or in the air. Their tools could have been made of stuff that vanishes fast. Jelly, chitin, even living tissue. If that's true, we'd never see their cities or machines. Maybe we'd just find a weird spike of one kind of chemical, or odd shapes in the rocks. but nothing we'd call evidence. Now here's a fun twist. What if we're the evidence in a way? Maybe life on Earth is shaped by whatever came before. Maybe ancient civilizations changed the air, the water, or the soil, and that's why we're here now. Maybe we're standing on the shoulders of something ancient, but invisible. It's a wild idea, but not impossible. Life changes the world all the time. Plants make the air we breathe. Tiny creatures in the ocean shape the rocks on the seafloor. Maybe, just maybe, the past is hidden inside us, not just in rocks and ruins. Let's look at how we search for lost civilizations. Most of our tools are built to find things like bones, stone tools, or metals. But what if that's not enough? Maybe we need to look for patterns, strange changes in chemicals, odd shapes in DNA, or weird marks in the rocks. Some scientists are starting to do this. They run computer models to see what kind of traces a civilization would leave, even if it disappeared millions of years ago. They look for signals instead of objects, things that don't fit the normal pattern. For example, a sudden spike in a rare metal, or a layer of rock with strange crystals, or a bit of DNA that doesn't match anything else. These might not prove anything, but they could point us in a new direction. Now think about what it means if we never find anything. Maybe there really was nothing before us. Maybe we are the first, or at least the first to build cities, write stories and look for others. That's kind of amazing if you think about it. Out of all the billions of years, we're the ones asking questions. We're the ones searching, wondering and dreaming. But what if we're not the first? What if someone, or something, came before us and vanished without a trace? What can we learn from that? Here's a thought. If the Earth wipes away almost everything, then nothing lasts forever. Not cities, not stories, not even memories. The only thing that sticks around is change itself. Whole worlds can rise, fall and be forgotten, and the planet just keeps spinning. Maybe that's a lesson for us. We work so hard to leave a mark, to build things that last. But in the end, even the greatest empires fade. Maybe the real value isn't in what we leave behind, but in what we do while we're here. Let's talk about humility for a second. It's easy to think we're the peak of everything. The smartest, the most advanced, the ones who finally got it right. But history shows that nature doesn't care. Dinosaurs ruled for 165 million years. We've been around for a tiny fraction of that. If the past is any guide, being advanced is no guarantee of staying power. In fact, the more complex a system gets, the more ways it can break down. That's a bit scary, but also freeing. It means we can focus on what matters now, not just on building monuments for the future. Now let's flip the question. Imagine someone, or something, finds traces of us millions of years from now. What would they think? Would they call us advanced? Or would we just be another blip in the long story of the planet? Maybe they'd find a strange layer of plastic, a spike of carbon, or a few odd chemicals. Maybe they'd wonder what kind of creatures left those marks. Maybe they'd make up stories just like we do. That's the beauty of the mystery. Even if we never find proof of lost civilizations, the search itself changes us. It makes us humble, curious, and open to new ideas. Here's another angle. The search for lost worlds isn't just about the past, it's about the future too. If the Earth can wipe away almost everything, what does that mean for us? How do we want to be remembered? Is there even such a thing as forever? Some people think we should leave a message in a bottle, something buried deep or sent into space so future beings know we were here. Others say it's better to live lightly and let the world heal when we're gone. There's no easy answer. But thinking about lost civilizations helps us see how fragile and temporary things really are. It reminds us to take care of what we have while we have it. Let's get philosophical for a minute. Looking for lost civilizations is really about looking for meaning. We want to feel like we're part of a bigger story. We want to know where we fit and what comes next. But sometimes the biggest lesson is that not every question has an answer. Sometimes the mystery is the point. It keeps us guessing, keeps us moving forward. Now, take a breath and think about what we've covered. We asked if there could have been a lost advanced civilization before humans. We dug through rocks, fossils, chemicals, and stories. We found that the Earth is a tough place for secrets to survive. We learned that even the best clues can look like something else, but in the end, we're left with wonder. Wonder at how much we don't know. Wonder at the twists and turns of history. Wonder at our own hunger to understand. Maybe that's the real secret. The search changes us more than any answer ever could. And now, as we wind down, let's take a moment for some final thoughts. Ones that might help you drift off to sleep, still pondering the mystery. So, what does it really mean to wonder about lost civilizations before humans? Not just as a fun idea, but as something deeper, something that sticks in your mind even after the lights are off. Let's try to pull all the threads together and see where it leaves us. Think about how much the world has changed just in the time people have been around. The continents have moved, oceans have come and gone, whole mountain ranges have risen up, then worn away. Even in just the last million years, the planet's face has shifted in ways we can barely imagine. That's before you even get to the billions of years before that. When you stack up all those changes, it's not surprising that so much is lost. Even the fossils we find are just a tiny slice, like a few puzzle pieces from a box with thousands missing. Most things that ever lived, or ever happened, have just disappeared. So if you start with that, you see why the question is so hard. If there was something before us, the odds are against us ever finding a clear sign. Even our own cities with all their concrete and steel won't last forever. In a million years, most of what we've built will be dust deep under the ground or turned into something else. But here's the twist. Just because something is unlikely doesn't mean it's impossible. Strange things do survive. Think about the oldest rocks on Earth. Some are over 4 billion years old, or ancient crystals that hold tiny drops of water from when the planet was young. Sometimes the world keeps a secret safe, even when everything else is wiped away. That's why people keep looking. There's always a chance that something weird, something out of place could turn up. Maybe it's a fossil that doesn't make sense. Maybe it's a strange pattern in the rocks. Or maybe it's a signal, some kind of chemical or a layer, or even an odd bit of DNA that points to a past we never guessed. People are good at spotting patterns, sometimes too good. We see shapes in clouds, faces in shadows, meaning in random noise. That's why some folks jump at every strange rock, every odd fossil, hoping it's a clue to something big. Most of the time it's not. But every now and then the world surprises us. Think about what it take to truly know there was a lost civilization. Not just a weird rock or a fossil that's hard to explain, but something solid. A pattern that's impossible to ignore. Maybe a group of metals that don't form naturally, or a layer of glass that could only come from technology. Something that says with no doubt someone was here. So far, nothing like that has turned up, but the search itself changes how we see everything else. It pushes us to look closer, to test our own ideas, and to ask better questions about the past. Let's talk about what a civilization even is. For most people, it means cities, writing, art, and maybe big monuments, but that's just our style. There could be other ways to be advanced that we don't even have words for. Maybe a group of animals found a way to control their world without ever building a house or writing a word. Maybe they had language we'd never understand. There's a lesson there. When we look for lost worlds, we have to remember our own blind spots. It's easy to think we'd recognize another civilization right away, but what if their traces are nothing like ours? What if their whole way of life left no marks that we'd call evidence? That's not just true for the distant past. It's true when we look at other planets too. Right now, scientists are searching for signs of life on Mars or under the ice of Jupiter's moons. But what if life out there doesn't work the way we expect? What if it's quiet or hidden or just plain strange? That's why the search for lost civilizations isn't just about digging in the dirt or scanning rocks. It's about learning how to ask questions without easy answers. It's about being ready for surprises, even when you're sure you know what you're looking for. Here's another angle. Even if we never find proof of a lost civilization, the idea still matters. It's a reminder that the world is old and that we're just one part of a much bigger story. It keeps us humble. It teaches us not to take our place for granted. Sometimes thinking about these questions can make you feel small. The Earth has spun for billions of years. Whole ages have come and gone. Dinosaurs ruled for longer than we can imagine, then vanished almost overnight. Before them, there were other rulers. Strange fish, giant insects, forests that stretched across the world. Each time the world changed and something new took over. Now it's us. But for how long? That's a question nobody can answer. Maybe that's the real power of this mystery. It reminds us that nothing is forever, not even us. And that's not a scary thought. Not really. It's just a fact. It means that what matters most is what we do while we're here. Let's shift gears for a second. Imagine what it would feel like to find real proof, a tool, a structure, a message from a world before ours. How would people react? Some would be excited, others might be scared. A few might doubt it, no matter how clear the evidence was. History shows that big discoveries take time to sink in. When people first found fossils of giant animals, it shook their whole view of the world. When they learned the Earth was much older than they thought, it took years for the idea to catch on. If someone ever found proof of a lost civilization, it would change everything. But even then, it would take time for people to really believe it. That's part of being human. We're curious, but we're also careful. We want answers, but we don't always like what we find. Still, the search goes on. There's another side to all this, the stories we tell. Myths about lost worlds, vanished cities, and forgotten people show up everywhere. Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, even cities hidden under the sand. These stories aren't just about the past. They're about hope and fear and what it means to be alive. Sometimes myths hold real clues. Other times they're just stories. But either way, they show what matters to us. We dream about being part of something bigger. We wonder if we're alone or if others have walked this path before us. That's what makes the search so powerful. Even if we never find what we're looking for, the act of looking changes us. It makes us more patient, more open to new ideas, and more willing to admit when we don't know something. Let's talk about the future for a moment. If we know that the planet wipes away most traces, what does that mean for us? Maybe it means we should focus less on what we leave behind and more on how we live right now. Maybe the real mark of a civilization isn't in its ruins, but in its kindness, its wisdom, and its care for the world. Think about how people today try to send messages to the future. Time capsules buried in the ground, records sent into space, stories written in books and carved into stone. We all want to be remembered. We all want to know that our lives mattered. But maybe, in the end, the best thing we can do is live well. Treat each other with respect, care for the planet, make the most of the time we're given. That's not a new idea. It shows up in old stories, in every culture. The idea that life is short, that nothing lasts forever, but that what we do still matters. It's a simple lesson, but it's easy to forget. Now, let's bring it back to where we started. The question of lost civilizations isn't just about the past. It's about us, how we see ourselves, what we believe, and what kind of world we want to build. If you look at history, you see the same pattern over and over. People rise, build, dream, and sometimes fall. The details change, but the big picture stays the same. We're all just trying to find our place in the world. Maybe that's the real heart of the mystery. We want to know if we're special, or if we're just part of a long chain of life that goes back farther than we can see. We want to know if anyone else has stood where we stand, looked up at the sky, and wondered about their place. And even if the answer is no, even if we really are the first to ask these questions, that's still pretty amazing. It means that for a little while, the story is ours to write. So, what should we take from all this? Maybe it's this. The mystery matters, even if we never solve it. The search, the questions, the stories, they're all part of being human. We may never find a lost civilization before humans, but in looking we find something else, a sense of connection, a reminder of how strange and beautiful the world is, and a reason to keep dreaming. The past is full of gaps. The future is wide open. And right now, in this moment, we get to wonder. That's a gift. So as the world goes quiet and the night grows deep, let yourself drift on these thoughts. The mystery is still there, waiting, and sometimes that's enough.